Chapter 1, Chapter 1, Warren Weasley. A summer morning was approaching in Devon. Long before dawn, a cool breeze swept across the fields outside Ottery St. Catchpole. It climbed over Stoteshed Hill and bent the vast reeds growing behind it into waves rolling like the ocean surf. The air carried a crisp freshness unique to the hours before sunrise. The residents of Ottery St. Catchpole always claimed there was nothing out there but endless miles of reeds and empty wilderness. The wind knew better. It knew a wizarding family had made a secret home among those reeds. The property featured a sizable garden, anchored by a pond at its center that rippled gently whenever the breeze picked up. The main building rose several stories high, appearing as though it might topple over at the slightest provocation. Only the ground floor seemed solid and conventional, covered in faded paint that someone still took the trouble to maintain. A wooden sign hung from the front door, words carved deep into the grain. The Burrow. The sign held a history of its own. More than 20 years ago, a young couple had selected this spot to build a life together. They poured every hope for a warm and happy future into constructing that single small story, believing it would suffice. Life, however, had far grander schemes in store. As more children arrived, the little house had no choice but to expand alongside them. They added floor upon floor, each story stacked slightly more crooked than the one below it. Over time, it evolved into the odd-looking tower standing there today, defying the laws of physics and Muggle expectations alike. High atop the burrow, the attic that had long housed a ghoul had been completely transformed. Rows of shelves now lined every wall, cluttered with boxes, jars, and bottles of all shapes and sizes. The center of the room was the only open space. A simple workbench stood there holding all the equipment needed for brewing potions. A fire crackled steadily beneath a copper cauldron, its contents bubbling away and sending fragrant steam curling toward the ceiling. Warren Weasley stood before the cauldron, his red hair falling across his forehead as he focused entirely on the task at hand. He had just finished carefully measuring his ingredients, and now he checked the potion's temperature one last time. Lady's mantle, boomslang skin, and just a pinch of fairy wings, he murmured to himself. He turned the flame down and waited for the cauldron to cool before reaching for his final ingredient. And finally, fluxweed, to give the beauty potion the body-shaping properties everyone desires. He watched the potion closely as the fluxweed dissolved into the liquid. The temperature fell steadily until a marvelous reaction occurred. The final bubble popped, and the thick, black liquid transformed right before his eyes. It cleared rapidly, shifting from murky opacity to the clarity of clear ember honey. A sweet, clean scent rose from the cauldron and filled the entire attic. Success! Warren went to the shelves and rummaged through a collection that appeared to be total chaos to anyone else, yet was perfectly organized in his mind. He pulled down a box of empty vials and waved his worn wand with practiced ease. The potion lifted from the cauldron, pouring itself into each vial with surgical precision without spilling a single drop. He sat down to label them by hand, his script neat and careful. Warren's Beauty Potion, Anti-Wrinkle Formula. For external use only. Apply with a gentle massage to smooth away wrinkles and restore healthy, tight skin. With the work finally finished, Warren stretched his arms overhead until his bones cracked. It was that deeply satisfying sound they always made after he had been hunched over the cauldron for too long. He turned to gaze out the attic window, watching the reeds sway in the morning breeze like ocean waves. Pink and gold bled into the blue as the sky brightened on the horizon. For a moment, that familiar feeling washed over him. It was the distinct sense that he did not quite belong there, even after all these years. 11 years. That was how long it had been since he had woken up in this world. From his very first breath, he learned he was a Weasley. He had 5 older brothers named Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, and George, plus a twin brother born 5 minutes after him. This was the boy he had accidentally kicked on his way out, named Ronald Bilius Weasley, or Ron for short. There was no question about what world he had landed in. He had landed in Harry Potter's world. In the 11 years since his birth, Warren still often looked back on his past life. Those memories remained fairly clear, all things considered. However, having lived in this world for so long, the past was inevitably starting to fade around the edges. That was to be expected. One could not spend more than a decade in a new world and expect the old one to stay completely sharp. Warren shook off the thought and silently summoned his system. A panel materialized in front of him, visible to no one else. Host, Warren Weasley. Mono-level, 370, average adult wizard, 500. Affinities, Charms 7, Dark Arts 6, Transfiguration 7, Potions 10, Herbology 6, Divination 2, Max, 10. Spells, Occlumency LV5, Max, Shield Charm LV3, 2/8, Disarming Charm LV2, 2/4, Levitation Charm LV2, 0/4, Full Body Bind LV2, 0/4, Fire Making Charm LV2, 1/4, Wand Lighting Charm LV2, 0/2. Potions, Elixir of Happiness, Invigoration Draft, Blood Replenishing Potion, Sleekiazi's Potion, Hair Raising Potion, Beauty Potion, Master Level, includes multiple formulas. Reputation Points, 12. The system awakened the very moment Warren took his first breath in this world. Warren had read all the books and watched all the movies in his past life. He knew exactly how dangerous this world would become as he grew older. If the system had not given him courage and direction from day one, he might have simply given up before he even started walking. He glanced at the affinities section of his system panel and felt that familiar satisfaction at seeing Potions 10 right there in black and white. It was a satisfaction nothing else could match. All his other affinities were innate, present from birth. Only Potions came from the system's starter pack when it first awakened, accompanied by max-level occlumency and a single randomly maxed affinity. He had been incredibly lucky with that roll. Over the past 11 years, he had slowly deciphered the mechanics of the reputation system through trial and error. It never issued quests, offered no shop to spend points in, and provided no lottery for prizes. Its sole function was exactly what the name suggested. At the end of every month, it calculated reputation points based on the spread of his name throughout the wizarding world. These points could be used to increase his spell levels. The numbers in parentheses next to each spell within the system panel showed exactly how many points were needed to advance to the next stage. Harder spells required more points to level up, while easier ones needed fewer. He could also improve spells through traditional practice, but mastering them this way required significant time and natural talent. Once Warren fully understood the mechanics of the system, he felt incredibly grateful that the starter pack had maxed out his potions affinity right from the beginning. Potions was, without a doubt, a deep and intricate subject. Yet the barrier to entry was surprisingly low. Give any witch or wizard some ingredients, a recipe, and a cauldron, and they could give it a try. Some of the simplest recipes did not even require a wand to brew. No other magical discipline was better suited for a young child who did not yet possess a wand. Warren had always been cautious by nature, a trait he carried over from his past life. He knew that both his identity as a transmigrator and the existence of his system were enormous secrets that must never be revealed. As a young child, he never tried to stand out or draw attention to himself. It wasn't until he turned 4 that Warren began carefully crafting a reputation as a prodigy. When it came to the basics like reading, writing, and drawing, he vastly outperformed Ron without even trying. Naturally, this sparked conversation, though it didn't cause a massive stir. By the time he was 7, he began gradually guiding this image of genius toward his true passion, potions. He started with the simplest brews and steadily worked his way up. 4 years had passed since then. In that time, he moved from his early days of tentatively asking Bill and Charlie for advice to refining established recipes and devising his own variations. Warren had become a moderately well-known Part-1er in certain circles. Specifically within the realm of beauty products, the papers he published and the refined cosmetic potions he developed had practically made him famous. He was now regarded as a beauty expert and a witch's best friend across the entire wizarding world. There was no particular reason he chose to specialize in beauty products of all things, really. They were simply easy to market and sold like wildfire. Chapter 2, The Weasley Family. Chapter 2, The Weasley Family. At first, Warren had genuinely considered becoming a truly versatile potions prodigy who could brew anything. But the field was already dominated by too many giants and he had no desire to compete with them directly. Warren's early attempts at brewing standard remedies like invigoration draughts and blood-replenishing potions simply could not measure up to the work of established masters. Apothecaries would not even stock them on their shelves, let alone sell them to customers. Then one day, he watched his mother washing Ginny's hair in the kitchen sink and loudly lamenting the sheer volume of it. She grumbled that she would have to buy more Sleekyazzy's potion at this rate and that stuff was certainly not cheap. Inspiration struck Warren like a bolt of lightning. In that single moment, the path forward became crystal clear. What market was easier to crack than women and children? None. Absolutely none. It turned out that beneath the magic, witches were still women at heart. Their desire for beauty and fear of aging made them far more willing to part with their gold than wizards. Even when 8-year-old Warren was a complete unknown in the potions community, plenty of witches were willing to try his Warren's beauty products on nothing more than curiosity and hope. He had since developed them into a full product line with formulas tailored to various needs. This brought him fame throughout the wizarding world and a steady income of several hundred galleons every month. "Warren, sweetheart, are you finished up there?" A knock on the attic door interrupted Warren's thoughts. He dismissed the system panel and continued packing the beauty potions into an empty box, bottle by bottle, as he called down. "I'm done, Mum. Is that Pimpernel's owl down there?" The attic door creaked open, and Molly walked in with a warm smile on her round face. She crossed the room and affectionately ruffled Warren's hair. "The owl is waiting downstairs by the fireplace. Your father is feeding it treats as usual, so take your time." She pulled a money pouch from her apron pocket and placed it on the workbench next to the box of potions. "The owl brought this with the order, Warren. You keep that safe." "Mum, keep it for the house." "Really, I don't mind." "No." Molly's expression turned firm for a moment, but it quickly softened as she pulled Warren into a warm, motherly embrace. She said, "My sweet, thoughtful boy, how could we possibly keep taking your money like that? Your father and I have always said that the money you, Bill, and Charlie earn is your own to do with as you please. Besides, you have already given us so much. We will not take another nut." This conversation had played out more than once since Warren started making real money from his potions. It always ended exactly the same way. At Molly's firm insistence, Warren would put the money away in his own savings. He had to admit that no matter how he looked at it, whether through the books he read in his past life or his current reality, the Weasleys might be poor by wizarding standards, but Arthur and Molly had never once failed as parents. They did everything they could for their children. With Molly's help, Warren finished packing the box securely and cast a quick charm to keep the bottles from breaking during transport. He picked it up and followed her downstairs to the kitchen. Downstairs, Arthur had just finished feeding the owl and sat at the table, buried as usual in the Daily Prophet. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, Warren. Take a look at this. The bird was getting awfully impatient waiting for you." If you knew the owl was getting impatient, Arthur Weasley, why didn't you go upstairs and help Warren pack? What do you actually do every single morning other than sit there reading that paper? My poor, sweet Warren works himself to the bone brewing potions for days on end, yet you never lift a finger to help him. You certainly don't do any housework either, do you? Hearing Molly's voice climb to that familiar, dangerous pitch, Arthur promptly ducked behind his newspaper until only the top of his balding head remained visible. And so another day began at the burrow, accompanied by Molly's spirited shouting and the owl's labored wing beats as it hauled a heavy box of potions out the window. It was the familiar daily scene Warren had grown up with. He went to wash up, his expression blank. As he passed the enchanted mirror in the hallway, it immediately began to vibrate with anticipation. "Shut up! No talking today!" Warren pulled out his worn wand and pointed it threateningly at the mirror. The mirror froze instantly, its surface still. Only after Warren had walked away did it mutter, barely audible, "Messy hair, that's all I was going to say. Just messy hair." By the time Warren had finished washing his face and hands, Molly had woken the rest of the children. A freckled boy was about to slip into the bathroom when he saw Warren coming out and froze awkwardly. Warren offered him a warm smile. "Morning, Ron." Ron puffed out his cheeks and mumbled. "Morning, Warren. Is that any way to talk to your own brother? Say good morning properly." Ron's face flushed instantly. He grumbled under his breath, "You were only born 5 minutes before me. That's nothing. 5 minutes doesn't make you special." Warren's smile widened at that. He still vividly remembered the moment they were born, despite having been a newborn himself. Ron was supposed to be born first, making him the older twin, but Warren had felt cramped and uncomfortable, so he had given his brother a sharp kick on the way out to claim the spot for himself. As the two boys stood in the hallway, locked in a silent standoff, a pair of identical twins bounced up behind Ron with their usual boundless energy. They slung an arm over each of his shoulders, trapping him between them like Aurors escorting a prisoner to Azkaban. 5 minutes older is still older, isn't that right, George? That's right, Fred. Just like how I'm 10 seconds older than you, meaning you still have to call me your elder brother when we're being formal. George, if you're saying that, you're clearly not awake yet. I'm the one who's 10 seconds older, remember? No, it's definitely me. Mum said so. Ron's head spun with their rapid-fire bickering, leaving him increasingly flustered. Just then, Ginny came running down the stairs and threw herself happily into Warren's waiting arms. Ron muttered something unintelligible under his breath and took the chance to duck into the bathroom to escape the twins. "Morning, Warren." "Morning, Ginny." Warren kissed his little sister on the forehead and carried her toward the kitchen. Of everyone in the family, he was closest to Ginny by far. Partly, this was because by the time she was born, he had grown used to his new life and genuinely accepted this family as his own. It was also partly because they looked the most alike of all the Weasley children, the two who were actually handsome. When they were younger, Arthur and Molly often joked that Warren and Ginny looked more like twins than Warren and Ron did. Despite being the actual twins, Warren and Ron did not look alike at all. The usual noisy morning routine continued even after everyone had sat down for breakfast. However, today was different from the norm in several ways. Arthur did not rush off to the ministry as he usually did. Percy, who typically vanished into his room with a book the moment he finished eating, sat by the living room window gazing out at the sky instead. Fred and George, always eager to run outside and get up to mischief, stayed seated at the kitchen table. They kept winking at Warren across the table and occasionally taking jabs at Ron. Ron, who usually grew so frustrated by their teasing that he would storm off to sulk in his room, sat through it all today without moving. He refused to leave the table no matter what they said. The whole family was waiting for something significant. They were expecting the Hogwarts letters. As the sun finally crested the hill, casting warm light through every window of the burrow, the sound of distant owl wings reached their ears. Molly, having feigned calm all morning despite her distraction, shot up to throw the kitchen window wide. Arthur set down his newspaper and retrieved the owl treats left over from the earlier visitor. Moments later, a school owl flew in through the open window and landed gracefully on the kitchen table. Tied to its leg with a bit of string were 2 letters. The envelopes were made of thick, cream-colored parchment. The wax seal was unmistakable. It bore a shield-shaped crest with a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounding the letter H. Molly untied the letters with trembling fingers, her excitement barely contained. She glanced at the back of one envelope and let out a breath of relief. Thank Merlin, it's finally here. The Hogwarts acceptance letters. I've been worried sick since yesterday. What if they didn't come for some reason? Arthur leaned forward eagerly, but he wasn't fast enough to grab the letters first. He tried to appear unconcerned. You always worry about everything, Molly. How could Warren possibly not get into Hogwarts with his talent? I was actually quite worried about Ron. You have no idea how terrified I was that he would not get a letter at all. That boy has been as stolid as a stone since he was little. Even his accidental magic was barely noticeable compared to the others. I thought perhaps. Mum. Ron, his face now the same shade as his hair, snatched the letter from her hand. He tossed Warren's letter across the table to him and clutched his own tightly to his chest as he ran upstairs to his room. Warren chuckled at the display. He did not mind in the slightest. He picked up his letter and turned it over to read the address. Mr. W. Weasley, The Kitchen, The Burrow, Ottery St. Catchpole. At that exact moment, the system panel materialized before his eyes. Main quest activated. Main quest 1, Enter Hogwarts, incomplete. Reward, 1 affinity point 50 mana level. Chapter 3, The Letter from Hogwarts. Chapter 3, The Letter from Hogwarts. On the 5th floor, after dealing with his emotionally charged mother and siblings, Warren returned to his room and stared at the system panel before him, lost in thought. This was the first time he had seen a mission since awakening the system. Moreover, the mission seemed unconcerned about success or failure, with no punishment, only a reward for success. But it was precisely that reward that caught his eye. Talent points. Ever since the newbie gift pack maxed out his potions talent, and he experienced how easy and magical it was to learn and brew potions with 10 talent points, Warren had been eagerly anticipating new ways to improve his talents. Especially the mana level. As the name suggests, the mana level refers to the total amount and intensity of magical power within a wizard's body. The higher the mana level, the more powerful the spells cast, and the more spells one can cast. However, the mana level cannot be simply understood as a mana bar or spell power, because casting spells also requires emotional energy, and the power of a spell is related to the proficiency in casting it. 2 months remained until the mission was complete. Warren stopped paying attention and closed the system panel. He glanced again at the Hogwarts letter he had opened. The first page, written in elegant handwriting, read: Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Confederation of Wizards, First-Class Wizard of the Order of Merlin, Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot. Dear Mr. Weasley, we are pleased to inform you that you have been admitted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Enclosed is a list of the required books and items. The term begins on September 1st. We await your reply by owl no later than July 31st. Sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. He finished writing his reply at the table and sent it to Hogwarts via the Weasley family's new owl. Poor old Errol was simply too old for the job. A few years ago, while delivering potions brewed by Warren, he had nearly tumbled straight into the pond. So, once Warren had made his money, he retired the old owl to enjoy his remaining years in the garden. That was also the first time Arthur and Molly had accepted Warren's money. Errol's advanced age had left them powerless. They couldn't even think of a reason to refuse. The money went toward renovations for the entire house, while daily life relied entirely on Arthur's salary. They didn't want their children to have conflicts over money. Thinking of money, Warren flipped to the second page of the letter, looking at the densely packed list of books and equipment, and couldn't help but shake his head. Looks like Ron will be picking up Bill and Charlie's leftovers again. Hopefully, that guy won't cry about it. In fact, Ron was much stronger than Warren had imagined. When Warren finished delivering the letter and came out of his room, Ron was in his room on the 4th floor, clutching the crumpled Hogwarts acceptance letter, pacing back and forth with his head held high. Percy patted him on the shoulder, encouraging him loudly. "Ron, I knew you'd get into Hogwarts." Ron held his head even higher. Warren rolled his eyes upstairs. Yesterday, he had overheard Percy whispering to his mother in the kitchen, discussing whether to forge a letter for Ron if he hadn't received one. "To celebrate you getting into Hogwarts, how about I give you Scabbers?" This sudden gift left Ron bewildered. He stared blankly as Percy pulled a rat from his pocket, shoved it into his arms, and quickly walked away. Leaning on the railing, watching this amusing scene, Warren heard 2 footsteps tiptoeing closer. Needless to say, the only people in the house who moved so sneakily were Fred and George. Sure enough, the twins sidled up to him the next moment, mimicking his posture, leaning over the railing and whispering loudly, "I bet Percy's been wanting to get rid of Scabbers for ages." "Right you are, George. Scabbers is old and ugly. He could kick the bucket any day now." Poor Ron. He must think Percy is making a noble sacrifice. "Yeah, George. Why is our brother so daft? I can't figure it out either, Fred. Maybe Ron got all the brains meant for both of them, and they all went to our other brother." The twins giggled and joked, their back and forth driving Ron crazy downstairs. He pulled the rat from his pocket, wanting to throw it away but unable to bring himself to do it. In the end, he just stormed back to his room in a huff. Having enjoyed the show, Warren smiled at the twins, who were clearly trying to butter him up. "All right, what do you two want?" The twins exchanged a glance, looking a bit embarrassed. "You tell him, George." "No, you tell him. You're the older brother." "Oh, so now you remember who's the older brother." After a few moments of their usual antics, they realized Warren was just smiling at them, waiting. Knowing they couldn't fool him, the twins positioned themselves on either side of him, one massaging his shoulders, the other patting his leg. "Well, dear Warren, you're off to Hogwarts soon. You'll have to go to Diagon Alley to get your school things, right? Mum says you can buy your own things. We always knew you had money. But we didn't know you had this much money. So if it's not too much trouble, maybe you could invest a little more in our materials. Just a tiny bit. Our great Weasley's Wizard Weez's enterprise is just a bit short." Seeing the usually mischievous, trouble-making twins groveling for galleons, Warren had to laugh inwardly. But he also knew that Molly had always forbidden them from experimenting, genuinely worried they would get into trouble. So even though the twins had secretly borrowed small amounts from him over the years, he had never let them borrow much. The twins always thought he just made a few sickles here and there. Until today. The books, equipment, and pets on the school list would cost at least 100 galleons to buy new. To the twins, that was a fortune. Warren enjoyed their massage for a moment before humming thoughtfully. "Last time you two borrowed 10 sickles from me, you said the exact same thing. That was last time. Our first joke product is almost ready, right, Fred?" "That's right, George." Seeing they were genuinely serious and having had his fun, Warren rubbed his chin. "Well, the garden needs cleaning tomorrow." Before he could finish, the twins jumped in eagerly. "Cleaning the garden? Such hard work shouldn't trouble you." "That's right. We'll handle it. I was going to say we should leave it for Ron, Fred. Consider it a token of our sincerity, George." "Makes sense." They both blinked at him expectantly. Warren waved them off. All right. We'll see how you do tomorrow." He watched them cheer and race downstairs, then shook his head. After a moment's thought, he walked over to Ron's door and knocked. The door yanked open a moment later. Ron scowled, still fuming and looking both angry and timid. "What do you want?" "Ron, come with me to Diagon Alley tomorrow. Ron's mouth opened and closed a few times. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he had always felt inferior around Warren and couldn't find the courage. Finally, he muttered defiantly, "Why me? I already have hand-me-downs." "Oh." Warren shrugged, sounding a bit disappointed. "I was going to give you your Christmas present early this year. Maybe get you a new wand. But if you don't want it." Before he could finish, Ron shouted, "I'll go." Warren raised an eyebrow. Ron's freckles stood out against his flushed face. He stammered, I'll go. I need to get some rat food for Scabbers anyway." Warren's gaze traveled past him into the messy room. The rat was on the desk, calmly nibbling a biscuit. Completely absorbed. Looking deliberately interested, Warren said, "Speaking of Scabbers, I've been trying to get him from Percy for a while. Since he's old and ugly anyway, why don't you give him to me for my potion experiments? What do you say, Ron? Want to think about it?" In the room, Scabbers froze mid-nibble. Ron's eyes widened. His lips trembled. For a moment, he couldn't speak. If Warren had made this ridiculous request a minute ago, Ron would have shouted and screamed, somehow finding the courage to drive away his mean older brother. But now, a new wand. This. Luckily, Warren didn't let him agonize for long. Seeing Scabbers start to edge toward the table leg, and not actually wanting to scare the rat off, Warren clapped Ron on the shoulder with a laugh. "Just kidding. A rat that size would be dead from one sip of potion." Scabbers shuddered violently. "Don't sleep in tomorrow. That's all." Ron let out a long breath. He watched Warren head upstairs before rushing back into his room and scooping up Scabbers. "Oh, Scabbers, don't be scared. Don't be scared. He was just messing with us." Outside the door, on the landing, Warren stared at Ron's door with a faint, cold smile. He would let that rat live. For now. Chapter 4, Party and Diggory. Chapter 4, Party and Diggory. The arrival of a Hogwarts letter was a momentous occasion for any family in the magical world. It could turn a Muggle family's entire world upside down overnight, ushering them into a reality they never knew existed. Or it could relieve a wizarding family's greatest fear, the terror that their child might be a squib with no magic at all. The Weasleys celebrated all day long. Molly prepared a mountain of food that would take days to finish. At lunchtime, the whole family set up a large tent in the garden near the pond. They prepared to enjoy the breeze, the scenery, and the water while eating together outside. Arthur even wanted to invite all the neighbors to join them. However, one look from Molly and her raised rolling pin quickly put a stop to that idea. She considered the Lovegoods a bit too odd for casual entertaining and didn't know the Fawcett's well enough to invite them. Ultimately, they settled on inviting only the Diggorys. Like Arthur, Amos Diggory worked at the Ministry in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. They were technically colleagues, even if they did not work closely together. However, Arthur's reason for the invitation went beyond simple professional courtesy or neighborliness. "That man is absolutely insufferable," Arthur complained. "Every time I see him at work, he never stops going on about how perfect his son Cedric is. He gets this smug expression, looking down on everyone else's children as if they simply don't measure up." Arthur looked indignant as he told Molly. So when Amos Diggory and his son apparat at the garden gate of the burrow, Arthur greeted them warmly, with Warren standing right beside him. "Amos, welcome to the burrow. This is my son, Warren. I imagine you've heard quite a bit about him already." Amos had a short brown beard and a ruddy complexion, looking as though he had just stepped out of a pub. He shook Arthur's hand firmly, sizing up Warren with interest. Warren offered a polite smile, the kind reserved for meeting an elder for the first time. Yes, Arthur. Your little potions genius. Of course I've heard all about him from the people at work." "So he got his Hogwarts letter today, did he?" And Ron too. Arthur's smile faltered slightly. He hadn't expected Amos to pinpoint his weak spot so accurately. He glanced vaguely around. Oh, Ron got one too, yes. Amos immediately raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you bring him along to meet us? If you ask me, you should let Ron spend more time with Cedric here. Our Cedric is so well behaved and such a model student. Professor McGonagall even personally praised his transfiguration work. He is a seeker on the Hufflepuff Quidditch team too, you know. Maybe he could help Ron improve in a few areas. Amos was a master at shamelessly bragging about his son. He knew precisely how to sidestep an opponent's strengths and target their weaknesses. The childish rivalry between the two grown men nearly made Warren burst out laughing. The boy accompanying Amos, Cedric Diggory, looked rather embarrassed by his father's behavior. He was genuinely handsome, still retaining the shyness of youth. As Amos dragged Warren's father toward the tent, Cedric stepped closer to Warren and apologized quietly. I'm really sorry about that. My father doesn't mean any harm. He just tends to get a bit carried away. As if on cue, Amos's voice boomed from across the garden. Cedric is always so humble and polite to everyone. Such a perfect gentleman at his age. Cedric stiffened awkwardly. He scrambled to change the subject. He extended his hand to Warren. I am Cedric Diggory. It is a sincere pleasure to meet you, Mr. Weasley. I have read every paper you published on potions. I must say, some of the development concepts you outlined are truly remarkable. Warren shook his hand firmly. I appreciate the kind words. They are just a few clever tricks I figured out along the way. There are still some people in the Potioneers Association who keep insisting I am going about things all wrong, though. Wherever there were people, there was inevitably conflict of some kind. Over the years, Warren had amassed a considerable fortune in galleons from his Warren's Beauty product line. Naturally, this success bred jealousy and resentment among other Pody-Oneers who had toiled in the field for decades. This was particularly galling given the undeniable nature of Warren's talent. It was unprecedented in wizarding history for an 8-year-old boy, not yet even enrolled at Hogwarts, to create a viable, market-ready potion. Had the other Pody-Oneers lacked the professional decency to avoid stealing from a child, or had Warren not been a pureblood from a respected family, someone would likely have cracked his formula by now to steal his market share. However, after publishing several well-regarded papers on potion development theory, Warren had firmly established himself as a legitimate expert. Warren's beauty had become a household name across Britain. Consequently, his rivals could do little more than snipe at him in the newspapers and hope their accusations landed. Warren's calm composure in the face of such hostility actually made Cedric a little envious, if he were honest. Cedric was ambitious in his own right and possessed a genuine admiration for true talent. As a result, despite Warren not having even started at Hogwarts, Cedric humbly asked him a few serious questions regarding potions and transfiguration. I haven't tried brewing polyjuice potion myself yet. You know, you can't find the recipe for that kind of advanced potion in any public texts. I've heard Scarpin's Revel-A-Spell can analyze the specific ingredients and proportions if you have a sample, but the Ministry heavily restricts that charm. So I'm really looking forward to the start of Hogwarts. The library and the professors there can teach you so much that you simply cannot learn on your own at home. But getting back to what we were saying earlier, even though I haven't brewed polyjuice potion personally, I know what its main ingredients are supposed to be. I suggest starting with some low-risk experiments using its core ingredient, powdered bicorn horn, to see what happens. By the time lunch arrived, Cedric had become Warren's devoted admirer for the day. He even ignored his father completely, making a point of sitting next to Warren at the table to keep asking questions. Hearing Warren's latest suggestion, he paused for a moment before responding. So you're saying the main transformative element in polyjuice potion actually comes from the bicorn horn itself? Not exactly. The transformation actually relies primarily on the specific properties of fluxweed. The bicorn horn merely allows for more variation. Just as the bicorn resembles a mixture of leopard, ox, and man all at once, it is the key ingredient that enables you to transform into a specific person. It can even transcend gender boundaries if brewed correctly. This involves a fundamental transformation of human biology at a deep level. I truly believe we haven't even begun to fully tap its potential yet. Warren spoke with absolute authority on the subject. Apart from him, no one at home possessed any particular talent for potions. He rarely had anyone to discuss the topic with. Even though Cedric's questions focused mostly on the transformative aspects of potions rather than the brewing process itself, Warren was still happy to finally have someone to discuss it with. On the other side of the table, Ron was having a thoroughly miserable time. He had tried to wait until the meal was properly underway before going downstairs, but Amos had cornered him anyway. He was forced to sit with his father and endure Amos's endless praise of his own perfect son, peppered with not-so-subtle digs at him. To escape the ordeal, Ron finally resorted to using Warren as an excuse. "Cedric is asking Warren about potions over there," Ron said quickly. "I want to go listen in and learn something." Amos fell silent immediately and let him go without another word. That just made Ron feel even worse. It felt as though his brother's shadow loomed over everything, following him wherever he went. The feeling was especially strong once lunch was finally served. Molly brought out a meticulously prepared hot pot, a Chinese dish Warren had recreated from Muggle magazines using his father's connections at the ministry. He had been driven to invent something genuinely flavorful by a deep hatred for years of bland British food. As the steaming pot was set on the table, Ron watched his father perk up instantly. He had been quiet and subdued all morning, but he immediately began boasting to Amos about Warren's culinary invention and just how clever his son was. Ron felt utterly defeated. Chapter 5, Diagon Alley. Chapter 5, Diagon Alley. Ron bounced back completely the very next day. He didn't sleep in as he usually did. He was washed, dressed, and ready before dawn even broke, huddled on the living room sofa with Scabbers in his lap. It gave Molly quite a start when she came downstairs. "Merlin's socks, Ron! What are you doing lurking down here in the dark and scaring me like that?" Ron mumbled a vague, unintelligible response. It wasn't until the twins came downstairs, ready to clean the garden as promised, that they loudly revealed the truth to their mother. "Ron is sucking up to Warren for the new wand he promised." "That's right. We overheard everything yesterday. Warren said he's giving Ron his Christmas present way early this year. A brand new wand." "Yes, George. Excellent recall as always. Looks like our dumb little brother isn't completely stupid after all. He knows you have to show proper respect to your generous benefactor. But he's not sincere enough about it, Fred. He didn't even tell Mum what was going on." "Right you are, George. His useless pride gets in the way again." The twins delivered their lines perfectly, laughing and joking until Ron was absolutely fuming. Then they bounced out of the house to get started on the garden. Warren was woken by their cheerful shouts outside his window. When he finally got up, the sun had already cleared Stoatshed Hill and was streaming through his window in striped golden patterns. Ginny was still fast asleep, curled up in his arms like a little cat. She had come to him the night before with a storybook, just like always. Warren had read to her for at least an hour before she finally drifted off to sleep. This was one of the main reasons they were such close siblings. Bill and Charlie had left home for work long ago and rarely visited. Percy never had patience for anything beyond his precious studies. Fred and George were always bouncing off the walls like hyperactive monkeys that had no off switch. Only Ron and Warren were willing to tell Ginny stories at bedtime. Of course, Ron only told stories that interested him personally, so Ginny had stopped listening to him ages ago. Warren got dressed quietly and opened the window to look outside. He saw old Errol flapping his wings and hopping through the overgrown garden bushes. The owl was flushing out gnomes, small brown creatures about a foot tall with big heads and spindly limbs that looked like potatoes with legs attached. The twins were zooming back and forth overhead on their old broomsticks, snatching up the gnomes Errol chased out, spinning them around until they were completely dizzy, and flinging them far into the wilderness beyond the garden. Their fading screams echoed across the field, mingling with the twins' delighted laughter. Those two. They can find fun in absolutely anything. Warren shook his head with a fond smile and went back to gently scoop Ginny up. The little girl stirred at the movement, rubbing her eyes sleepily and letting out a wide yawn. Warren? Where are we going? I am going to Diagon Alley today, Ginny. You need to go back to your own room and get some more sleep. Oh. She buried her face in his shoulder, mumbling drowsily. I want chocolate frogs. Can you get me some? All right. I'll get you a whole box. As he carried Ginny downstairs, he ran into their mother, who was coming up to get them for breakfast. Oh, look at my two little sweethearts first thing in the morning. My absolute darlings. Molly's ample figure enveloped them both in a warm hug. She dabbed at her eyes. Mum is just so happy to see you children being so loving with one another. Warren, you are always so thoughtful, taking care of Ginny like that and buying Ron a new wand with your own money. Though honestly, I think his old hand-me-down wand would have been perfectly fine for starting out. Downstairs, Ron heard the commotion and came running, clutching Scabbers so hard he nearly crushed the poor rat. He was absolutely terrified that his awful brother would actually agree with their mother and take back the generous offer. But Warren merely glanced at him calmly. It is all right, Mum. A basic wand is only 7 galleons. Besides, using a wand that has not properly chosen you could negatively affect his studies from the very start. We do not want that. 7 galleons for a wand. Only 7. Ron felt as if he had been dunked in a vat of vinegar. He was sour to his very core, a confusing mix of envy and gratitude swirling within him. Knowing her son was financially secure, Molly did not argue further. She loved Warren and Ron equally as her sons. While she did not approve of Ron spending Warren's money as a matter of principle, she would not stop Warren from giving his twin brother a generous gift. Seeing her youngest son forced to use his older brother's old, worn-out things already made her feel guilty. Warren was absolutely right about one thing, using the wrong wand could cause real problems later on. She let the matter drop without another word. Molly carried Ginny back up to her room to sleep more. Warren washed up and had breakfast with Ron in relative silence. When it was finally time to leave, Molly took a flower pot filled with glittering grey-white powder from the mantelpiece and spoke to them both. Warren, you have used Flua powder many times before. You know exactly what to do. But Ron, you have never used it. Watch your brother very closely. You have to speak clearly and firmly when you throw it down. Say Diagon Alley. Diagon Alley. Do you understand? Yes, Mum. Ron was so excited that the tips of his ears turned bright pink. Molly held the pot out to Warren first. Warren frowned slightly at it. He had never liked using this stuff at all. It always got his clothes and hair completely dirty. But he had not learned to apparate yet, so this was his only practical option for travel. Warren took a pinch of Flua powder, stepped into the fireplace, and threw the powder down hard at his feet while shouting clearly, Diagon Alley. With a loud whoosh, green flames erupted all around him. Warren felt like he had been shoved inside a running washing machine. His body stretched like warm taffy, spinning around a central point while distorted, surreal images flashed past his vision. A few seconds later, he stumbled to a stop and shook his head to clear the lingering dizziness. He brushed the soot off his clothes with a grimace as he looked around. He was standing in a small, enclosed courtyard. Several fireplaces were set neatly into the dark brick walls surrounding him. Green flames flared up intermittently in each one, disgorging witches and wizards of all ages. Some had children with them, who were probably also there to buy school supplies after receiving their Hogwarts letters. Warren did not observe for long. He stepped aside and waited patiently. Soon, green flames flared behind him, and the next moment Ron tumbled out covered in soot, sprawling at Warren's feet dramatically. Ron, was all that really necessary? Warren grinned and pulled him up by the arm. Ron's eyes were still spinning in their sockets. He had absolutely no idea what Warren was saying to him. By the time Molly arrived through the flames and brushed the soot off him, leading both boys out of the enclosed courtyard and into the bustling Diagon Alley, Ron finally came back to his senses. It was a long, winding street, a few yards wide, paved with uneven cobblestones and crowded with witches and wizards in pointed hats of every color. Shops of every imaginable description lined both sides of the street. Their square windows were divided into many panes of glass. Sunlight streamed down from above, illuminating the fascinating displays and the goods inside. Near the entrance to the courtyard, a shop door opened and a witch and wizard emerged with a boy between them. The boy was chewing something, and his hair changed color with every single bite he took. Ron stared, eyes wide. He recognized the shop sign above them. Gamble and Jape's Wizarding Joke Shop. It was Fred and George's absolute favorite place in the whole world. They had talked about it endlessly at home. It was the stuff of his dreams. In a daze, he heard Warren beside him say, "Ron, welcome to Diagon Alley." At that exact moment, a cheerful voice from behind them said, "Welcome to Diagon Alley." == Chapter 6, The Grangers and Milo. Chapter 6, The Grangers and Milo. Warren turned around and spotted a thin witch with a stern face stepping out of a narrow archway. She was leading a young couple and a little girl behind her. He recognized the leaky cauldron immediately. He had been there before, but Tom, the stooped owner, always refused to serve him butterbeer no matter how many times he asked. Back when he had read the books in his past life, he had always wondered what butterbeer actually tasted like. The young couple stood out in Diagon Alley. They were clearly muggles, dressed far too ordinarily for this place. The man wore a suit, the woman a dress, and they both looked completely overwhelmed by everything around them. Molly spotted them too. Her whole face lit up when she saw who was leading them. Professor McGonagall! Professor McGonagall! She waved excitedly. "Merlin, it is so good to see you." Professor McGonagall clearly knew Molly well. With 5 Weasley children already attending Hogwarts, all of them in Gryffindor, it would have been impossible not to know her by now. Her stern expression softened just a bit as she led the Muggle family over. "Mrs. Weasley, are you here to buy school supplies for the children?" "Yes, Professor McGonagall." Molly's gaze settled on the young girl. "Oh, is this young lady starting at Hogwarts this year as well?" "That is correct." McGonagall gestured toward the family. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Granger, and their daughter, Hermione. She is a new student this year." After the introductions, McGonagall studied Warren and Ron for a moment. Her gaze lingered longest on Warren. "Mr. and Mrs. Granger, this is Mrs. Weasley and her 2 sons, Warren Weasley and Ron Weasley, Professor." Ron's voice sounded small from behind Molly. "Ron Weasley." McGonagall nodded at Ron, still hiding behind his mother. Her lips were pressed together in a thin line. She turned back to Warren, and the corner of her mouth twitched into what might have been a smile if you looked closely enough. She leaned down and gently took his hand. "Mr. Weasley, it is a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure is mine, Professor McGonagall." Warren offered a polite smile before glancing past her. A nervous Muggle couple stood there, greeting Molly awkwardly. Trailing behind them, a young girl stared at him with open curiosity, making no attempt to hide it. Warren snapped his fingers and summoned the faintest whisper of magic. Instantly, the girl's bushy hair lifted away from her brow, floating like seaweed in a gentle current. "It was nothing, really. Just a simple trick that didn't even require a wand. Yet for a Muggle family witnessing real magic for the first time, it was nothing short of astonishing. Mr. and Mrs. Granger gasped, hands flying up to cover their mouths. The girl's eyes went wide. She reached up to smooth down her levitating hair, though her gaze kept darting back toward Warren. She looked as though she were fighting the urge to rush over and bombard him with endless questions about how he had done it. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat. Mrs. Weasley, I must escort the Grangers to Gringotts to exchange currency, so I won't keep you any longer. She paused, glancing at Warren. Mr. Weasley, I trust you will not perform such tricks in front of other Muggles. You are aware the Ministry strictly forbids it. Warren nodded cheerfully. Of course, Professor McGonagall. As they walked away, Hermione kept glancing back at him. Warren offered her a smile. She froze for a moment as a faint blush rose to her cheeks. What a cute kid! Warren watched until she vanished into the crowd, looking back every few steps. Ron's impatient muttering finally broke his trance. Are we going to get my wand or what? Ollivanders is probably packed today. We might have to wait in line. Ron's mind was entirely fixated on his new wand. As for the Muggle family they had just met, he couldn't care less who they were or why they might matter. Warren gave him a strange look. Ron's heart skipped a beat. Nervously, he touched his face. What are you staring at? Nothing. Whatever makes you happy. Ron was certainly happy. It was his first time in Diagon Alley, and his eyes were nearly popping out of his head. Despite his eagerness to get to the wand shop, his feet rooted themselves to the spot the moment they passed Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor. Molly probably worried he would get upset later when he saw Warren buying all new books and robes. For once, she relented and bought him an ice cream. With his ice cream finally in hand, he stopped pestering them. Molly led Warren through Madame Malkin's and Flourish and Blot's, picking up robes, books, and all the other supplies. Most shops offered delivery by owl, so they didn't have to lug everything around. Books, robes, cauldron, scales. Molly checked her list. Oh, that's right. You can also bring a pet. Aelip's Owl Emporium and the Magical Menagerie are right over there. Warren, what kind of pet do you want? Warren glanced at Ron, who was still obliviously licking his ice cream, and grinned mischievously. I want a cat. Ron froze. His face went pale. He could already envision the miserable fate awaiting Scabbers at home, constantly stalked by a prowling cat. However, a new wand awaited him. The temptation whispered seductively in his mind, drowning out any urge to object. He held his tongue and returned his attention to his ice cream. The Magical Menagerie was the largest pet shop in all of Diagon Alley. One could find almost any creature suitable for a witch or wizard there, barring those strictly banned by the Ministry. The owner was a witch with thick, black-rimmed glasses. She greeted the Weasleys warmly, and when she heard Warren wanted a cat, she gave a sharp flick of her wand to summon a row of cages. Excellent choice, Mr. Weasley. So many young wizards fail to grasp how significant a pet truly is. They almost always choose an owl first, prioritizing utility over affection. Honestly, it is rather frustrating. She gestured toward the cages. Take a look. These are all the cats we have in at the moment. There is a wonderful variety of breeds, and strictly between you and me, many of them have a touch of Neasel blood. They are remarkably intelligent creatures. Meow, meow. The cats were undeniably clever. Sensing a potential buyer, many of the cats lounging lazily perked up and meowed softly at Warren. One of them was enormous. The others were perhaps 2 feet long at most, but this one was a solid 4 feet from head to tail. She was powerfully built, with beautiful, long, thick fur that made her look 2 or 3 times larger than the others. She was also the most eager, pressing her solemn face against the bars of her cage. When Warren reached out a finger, she strained to squeeze through the gap to reach him. "Oh my, Mr. Weasley!" The owner sounded delighted. "It seems this young lady has taken quite a liking to you. She is a Maine Coon with Neasel ancestry. They are usually bred only in the Americas. She is very rare here in Europe." Warren slipped his finger through the bars. The cat retracted her claws and gently grasped it with her thick, soft paws. He liked her docile nature. Her coat was beautiful as well, a blend of orange red and golden yellow that reminded him of a tea he had loved in his past life. "I'll take her." After paying, Warren led the cat out of the shop. She was heavy, weighing at least 15 pounds, and at 4 feet long, making her a struggle for Warren to carry since he was still small for his age. When she appeared in front of Ron, the color drained even further from his face. "That's a cat." Warren grinned happily. "Of course she's a cat. I'm naming her Milo." He looked down at her. "Milo, go sniff out that rat smell on Ron." Meow. Chapter 7, Ollivanders. Chapter 7, Ollivanders. Milo definitely had Neasel blood in her. Her sharp senses picked up on something, and for the rest of their shopping trip, she kept circling Ron and sniffing at him. Her serious expression and piercing eyes made Ron's legs shake. He did not even dare complain. He just silently mourned for Scabbers. Once they finished the rest of their shopping, Molly crossed another item off her list with satisfaction. "All right, just Ollivanders left now. Ron, Warren, my darlings, you'll have your own wands very soon." That good news finally cheered Ron up a bit. The family followed the crowd deeper into Diagon Alley. Ollivanders was the oldest shop there, even older than the Leaky Cauldron, which had served as the gateway to the magical world since 1500. It was tucked away at the very end, a small, shabby shop with peeling paint and dusty windows that offered no hint of its long history. Only the sign above the door hinted at the truth. Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. The Weasleys stepped inside. The shop felt tiny, mostly because it was so crammed with merchandise. Boxes were stacked in narrow piles everywhere, reaching nearly to the ceiling. There must have been thousands of them. It was very quiet inside. The only sound was the soft tinkling of the doorbell as they entered. The dust and stillness gave the impression that secret magic was hiding in the shadows. An old man with large, pale eyes emerged from behind the stacks. In the dim light of the shop, his eyes gleamed like two moons. "Ah, good afternoon. Welcome to Ollivanders." His voice was soft and airy. Warren heard Ron gulp loudly beside him. Molly, however, was accustomed to the scene. She had been to this shop 5 times before, not counting her own school days. With Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, and George all having gone off to school in rapid succession, hand-me-down wands had never been an option. She greeted him with a bright smile. "Good afternoon, Mr. Ollivander. Do you remember me?" Of course, of course." Ollivander nodded several times, replying in his airy tone. "Molly Pruitt Weasley. You need not ask me that every time you visit. I am not yet in my dotage." He looked at Warren and Ron. "So? 2 new Weasleys starting this year?" "Yes, Mr. Ollivander. Ah, the start of term at Hogwarts is always my favorite time of year. Not simply because of the business, though that is certainly part of it. More importantly, the wands I have crafted finally get to meet their owners." Ollivander cupped a hand behind his ear as if listening to a distant sound. Ron was terrified. He grabbed his mother's sleeve and tried to pull her toward the door. "Let Warren go first, Mum. I need some air." Molly sighed and followed him out, leaving Warren alone with Ollivander. The wand maker seemed unperturbed by their departure. He took a tape measure from his pocket. "Mr. Warren Weasley, which is your wand arm?" "Right." Ollivander nodded and started measuring Warren, murmuring softly. "Mr. Warren Weasley, I have heard of you. The potions prodigy. Thank you, Mr. Ollivander. You don't seem frightened of me at all. Warren glanced at him. The first time I brewed a potion, I made Ron cry because he thought I was cursing him. I simply have a habit of muttering to myself while I work. Ollivander nodded approvingly. Yes, yes. Those who master a craft often harbor their own little eccentricities, adhering to principles and persistence that others find hard to understand. Warren raised an eyebrow. So measuring every customer in this manner is your principle? Naturally. Every witch and wizard is unique, and every wand is unique in its own right. I must understand you as deeply as possible to find the perfect match. Warren cast his gaze toward the thousands of wands stacked high around them. I have heard that you rely solely on unicorn hair, phoenix feather, and dragon heartstring for your wand cores. With such a restricted palette of materials, how do you ensure that no two wands are exactly the same? Ah, an excellent question from our potions prodigy. You have hit the nail on the head. Ollivander seemed pleased by the inquiry. With other young witches and wizards, I simply say that every unicorn, phoenix, and dragon is unique. It is easier for them to grasp that way. But since you have asked, I will be honest with you. It also depends on the wood of the wand. He had finished his measurements by then. He pondered for a moment, then produced a box and presented the wand inside to Warren with both hands. 12 inches. Dragon heartstring. Fir wood. It prefers witches and wizards who are focused, strong-willed, and perhaps even dominant. Warren took it and gave it a gentle wave. A gust of wind swept through the tiny shop, rattling the boxes on the shelves. Ollivander immediately took the wand back. He blinked at Warren. You see? It suits you well enough. But you are not the right match for it. Soon he selected another box. 10.5 inches. Dragon heartstring. Elm wood. There's an old superstition that it favors pure bloods, but in my experience, that is likely nonsense perpetuated by the pure bloods themselves. I believe it prefers those with a noble bearing and natural leadership instead. When Warren waved the wand this time, golden sparks erupted in the air like fireworks. But Ollivander took it back. It likes you too, but it is still not the perfect fit. After 2 attempts, Warren drew on his maxed-out potions affinity and understanding of materials to form an idea. When Ollivander had said earlier that some wands were cheering, perhaps it was not mere theatrics. Holding those first 2 wands, he had sensed their eagerness. It was a vague feeling, hard to describe, but it was definitely real. So when Ollivander offered him a third wand, Warren did not take it. Instead he asked, "You mentioned the wood earlier. Does that mean the type of wood determines a wand's unique character and preferences?" Ollivander paused, his pale eyes blinking slowly. After a moment, he nodded. "Very perceptive, Mr. Weasley. In truth, that is a wand maker's secret. The core determines the type of magic for which the wand is best suited, while the wood determines the wizard the wand will choose as its master." Warren considered this. He could not hear the wands singing as Ollivander could. However, recalling the old man's words that the wand had liked him but was not a match, and considering his own unique history as a traveler from another world, Warren felt he might need a special wand. He needed one that was truly meant for him. The bond between wand and wizard was not simply about choice. It was about mutual recognition. That explained why Ollivander had claimed it wasn't a good match. He didn't truly know Warren. He knew nothing of Warren's past life. With this realization, Warren closed his eyes and let his magical signature expand by releasing the occlumency shields he maintained around himself at all times. Then, he felt it. He walked over to a cluttered shelf and took down a box. As he opened the lid, he could sense the wand inside practically leaping into his hand. Shvoob! As Warren waved the wand, arcs of electricity danced in the air. They split and flowed like living serpents, skittering across the surfaces of the countless boxes surrounding them. Ollivander's eyes went wide. 14 inches. Dragon heartstring. Elder wood. It is proud, unforgiving, and volatile. It favors those with an unusual destiny. Chapter 8, September 1st. Chapter 8, September 1st. Proud, extreme, and volatile. Warren sat on the steps outside Ollivanders, basking in the warm afternoon sun as he examined his new wand. The words Ollivander had murmured just 10 minutes ago still echoed in his mind. Dragon heartstring is exceptionally versatile, Mr. Weasley. Unlike unicorn hair, it does not turn aside from the dark arts, nor does it share the equilibrium of a phoenix feather. It will aid you in channeling your magic into spells that are powerful, brilliant, and flamboyant. I must warn you, however. It is the most prone to accidents of all core materials, especially when paired with elder wood. That wood is extreme by nature. From the moment it is created, it craves greatness. There is an old superstition that elder wands bring misfortune. In my experience, that is complete nonsense. Yet, the truth is that if your destiny ever ceases to be unique, if you cease to be powerful, or if you are ever defeated, it may very well abandon you. You are sure to have heard the tales of the Elder Wand. The Tales of Beetle the Bard is a children's book, of course, but it does illustrate the nature of the Elder Wand accurately. It has never truly belonged to anyone. Warren traced his finger gently along the wand. The knotted grain of the elder wood felt smooth beneath his touch, fitting comfortably in his grip. He sensed a faint tremor running through it, vibrating with a near-joyful eagerness to channel his magic. "So, will you abandon me?" he whispered. The wand, naturally, offered no wisdom in reply. "Meow." Milo, her head resting on Warren's lap, looked up at him. She mewed softly and licked his chin, as if attempting to comfort him. Warren smiled and scratched Milo's thick fur. The massive cat leaned into his touch, purring contentedly. Why would he worry about a wand betraying him? Warren would simply never allow the conditions Ollivander had described to happen. A destiny no longer unique? That wouldn't happen unless another transmigrator somehow appeared in this world. No longer powerful? Then he would just have to stay powerful and keep getting stronger. Defeated by someone? Not a chance. Ollivander had recounted the tale of the Elder Wand, but he dismissed it as a mere fairy tale for children. Warren knew the truth. The Elder Wand was real. It had helped Grindelwald rise to power across Europe. It had rested peacefully in Dumbledore's hands for decades. It never simply abandoned its master without reason. Ultimately, be it Grindelwald's defeat or Dumbledore's death, those were choices made by the wizards themselves. A wand was just a tool, nothing more. Someday, when you are ready, we will see how you measure up against the one holding the Elder Wand. Smiling at the thought, Warren tucked the wand into the holster on his belt. Behind him, the sounds of wands being tested continued from inside Ollivanders. At last, the door opened and Ron emerged, beaming, his new wand held high. 14 inches. Willow. Unicorn hair. It's brilliant, Ron boasted loudly. I made thousands of boxes float in there. You should have seen it, Warren. His smugness was a stark contrast to the terrified, screaming boy their mother had practically dragged into the shop less than 20 minutes ago. Having finally got something new, something that wasn't a hand-me-down from his brothers, Ron was absolutely insufferable. Then Warren smiled and asked, "Did you buy a wand holster while you were in there?" Ron's smug grin froze on his face. It requires special polish, you know. A decent set costs at least a few dozen sickles. Ron's shoulders slumped. Oh, and people usually exchange presents on Halloween, don't they? I suppose some people won't be receiving any this year if they aren't careful. Warren's smile remained pleasant. Ron sniffled, tears welling in his eyes. A stubborn part of him wanted to puff out his chest and shout a retort, but Halloween presents were at stake. Curse it all! He had been tricked again. Molly, like many middle-aged women, loved to chat. When she finally finished catching up with Ollivander and stepped out, their Diagon Alley shopping trip was effectively complete. Well, perhaps the trip was not entirely satisfying for Ron in the end. They returned to the Burrow via the Flow network. Throughout the afternoon, their purchases arrived by owl, including Milo, who could not travel by Flow. Along with his own school supplies, Warren had bought a variety of sweets for Ginny. The little girl gave him a big kiss on the cheek before running off to share them with Milo. She had fallen in love with the cat the moment she saw her. When Milo caught Warren's scent and rubbed against Ginny's legs, Ginny practically glued herself to the animal. She dragged Milo all over the house, showing off her new territory. This only made Ron more miserable. He spent almost the entire day hiding in his room, afraid to take his eyes off Scabbers for even a second. But early the next morning, Milo caught Scabbers on a second-floor windowsill. The rat had somehow managed to open Ron's window and was trying to make a run for it, with a few stolen biscuits tucked under his tail. Unfortunately for him, a well-placed stunning spell from above turned the sneaky rat into Milo's personal plaything. When Ron got up to use the bathroom, he realized Scabbers was missing. Upon finding the pair, he saw that the rat had already lost a sizable patch of fur and was nearly dead. Ron dissolved into hysterics, yelling and screaming as he tried to shoo Milo away. Ginny stormed over and pummeled him with her small fists until he backed off. After that, Ron nailed all his windows shut and begged Arthur to make him a rat cage. Scabbers became a prisoner in his own home. Every day when Warren walked Milo past the 4th floor, he would see Ron peeking through a crack in his door, watching them warily. Honestly, it was a bit pathetic. The only times Ron seemed happy were during Warren's twice-monthly potion brewing sessions. Warren would spend those days in the attic with Milo, leaving Ron entirely alone downstairs. Warren did not worry too much about Scabbers, provided the rat did not manage to escape. In the weeks leading up to the start of school, Warren's life continued as usual. He brewed potions every fortnight and practiced spells in his spare time. He had been learning basic spells from his older brother's old textbooks since he was 8, using their discarded wands to hone his skills. His progress was inconsistent. Without a teacher to guide him properly, self-study could only take him so far. Arthur and Molly were too caught up in work and the house. Percy was too self-absorbed to sacrifice his own study time to help his younger brothers. As for Fred and George, they were a lost cause. Warren recalled from the books that, despite being 2 years older than Harry, they would still need him to teach them the disarming charm later on. It was ridiculous, really. Finally, September 1st arrived. Chapter 9, Platform 9 3/4. Chapter 9, Platform 9 3/4. Early in the morning, Molly Weasley's voice rang through the burrow. Percy! Percy! Where are your robes and your cauldron? And what is with all this rubbish stuffed in your trunk? Get it sorted out right now. Fred, George, how many times do I have to tell you to? You are not taking those ridiculous sweets to Hogwarts. Get rid of them right this instant. Ron, what are you still doing in bed? Get up immediately and check your trunk again. If you aren't down here in 5 minutes, I will throw you in the pond and lock you in the cellar. You can forget about Hogwarts entirely. Merlin's beard, you children will be the death of me. Why can't you be more like Warren? He packed his things 2 days ago without anyone having to tell him. He has to bring all his school supplies, plus his potions and ingredients. He certainly has a lot to do. Molly dabbed at her eyes. Then she spotted something and brandished her wand angrily. Scabbers, Oxio! A fat, squeaking rat flew through the door. Molly caught it firmly. It squeaked once and went limp. Ronald Weasley! What is the matter with you? You can't even keep track of your own rat properly. She softened immediately at the sight of Milo. Oh, Milo, sweetheart! If you hadn't chased him, he would have gotten away again. Come here. Mummy has some treats for you. Meow. The chaos continued for over 2 hours. After Molly had checked and rechecked that everyone had everything they needed, a car horn honked from outside. Molly led the way, carrying Warren's box of potion ingredients, with her sons trailing behind. Outside, a car was parked in front of the house. Arthur Weasley stood beside it, patting the roof proudly. Get in, children. Dad is taking you to the station the Muggle way today. An ordinary car could never fit this many people, but Arthur, despite working in the misuse of Muggle artifacts office, was hardly one to follow the rules to the letter. The car was kept in a shed next to the burrow. All summer, Arthur had been tinkering with it, adding magical modifications. Occasionally, Warren, Fred, or George would help him out. The passenger compartment and the trunk had both been expanded with undetectable extension charms. There was plenty of room inside for everyone. Arthur had even tried to make it fly, but he had not quite managed it yet. The family loaded their luggage into the spacious boot and piled into the car, accompanied by Molly's non-stop shouting. Fred and George were roughhousing and got their letters confiscated. Percy was sulking in the corner. Ron was clutching Scabbers, kicking his legs and yelling at Milo to get away from him. Every few seconds, one of them would yelp as Molly boxed their ears. Arthur ignored it all completely. He cheerfully turned the key, studying the owner's manual and a map as he started the engine. Warren sat in the passenger seat, speechless. Dad, do you actually know how to drive this thing? Of course I do. I've been practicing for 3 whole days now. Arthur pointed at the manual. Oh, Warren, what does this mean right here? Clutch? Release it. Gears? How do I shift them properly? Blimey! Those clever Muggles and their inventions are incredible. 10 minutes later, they had travelled less than 50 meters from the house. His patience finally snapped. Warren hauled his father out of the driver's seat, cast a Muggle-repelling charm on the car, and took the wheel. Arthur was disappointed his fun was over, but true to his nature, he didn't mind in the slightest. That's my boy. A true Weasley genius. Daddy knew you'd take to Muggle things naturally. Don't worry, son. By the time you come home for the holidays, Daddy will have learned to drive properly. Then I'll take you for what do Muggles call it? A joyride. Warren just rolled his eyes. The car sped along, the Muggle-repelling charm keeping the police at bay, but they still didn't reach King's Cross Station until 10:30. More chaos erupted as they piled out and squeezed through the crowds, searching for platform 9 3/4. Percy, still sulking after his letter had been confiscated, grumbled, so many Muggles everywhere. Naturally, dear. This is a Muggle station, after all. There. The third pillar. Ginny, perched on her father's shoulders, had spotted it. The family hurried over. Percy, you go first. Good. Fred, you're next. I'm George, Mum. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. Mummy just can't tell you two apart sometimes. The twins shared a mischievous grin. George gave their mother an affectionate peck on the cheek. Actually, I'm Fred. Laughing, he pushed his trolley and vanished straight through the pillar. Warren, following Molly and Arthur, looked around the station. It was his first time there, and honestly, he felt a bit disappointed. The place was old and shabby, with many sections in disrepair. Only the grand, arched ceiling hinted at its former glory. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted someone standing behind them. It was a boy pushing a trolley piled high with luggage and an owl cage. He looked small and skinny, clearly malnourished, with broken glasses and a slightly vacant expression on his face. Compared to him, Ron, the family's usual punching bag, seemed tall, sturdy, and lively. The boy noticed Warren looking at him. He froze, unsure of what to do. He looked as if he wanted to approach, but he was too nervous to move. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, revealing the lightning bolt scar. The moment Warren saw it, he knew exactly who this clueless boy was. He was Harry Potter, the famous boy who lived. "Hurry along, Warren, you're right behind Ron." "Oh." Molly turned to call him, but she had spotted Harry too. His scar was hidden by his hair again, so she didn't recognize him. Still, the sight of a lonely child instantly triggered her maternal instincts. She bustled over and beckoned to him. "Are you a first year too, dear?" "Yes, ma'am." Harry nervously wiped his hands on his trousers. "Platform 9 3/4, ma'am. I can't find it anywhere. I don't know how to get in." "It's all right, dear. Do you see that barrier between platforms 9 and 10? There is a ticket booth behind it. Just push your trolley straight at it and don't stop." Harry looked confused, but he trusted her completely. He squeezed his eyes shut, trembling slightly, before charging at the barrier as if heading to his doom. He vanished straight through it. Warren followed, stepping through without a hitch. The world dimmed for a moment, then brightened once more. He found himself standing beside a magnificent scarlet steam engine, parked alongside a platform teeming with students and parents. A sign on the side of the train read clearly, "Hogwarts Express." Chapter 10, The Hogwarts Express. Chapter 10, The Hogwarts Express. Smoke billowed from the scarlet steam engine and curled over the platform like thick grey clouds. The crowd buzzed with chatter as owls hooted from their cages and cats of every color darted between people's legs. Milo sat perched on Warren's trunk, watching the other cats with the calm, superior expression of someone who knew she was better than the rest. Harry had vanished into the sea of people. Warren didn't bother looking for him. He stood on his toes, spotted Fred and George's red hair bobbing above the crowd, and pushed his way toward them. "Where is Percy? Haven't seen him anywhere." His Majesty the Prefect had important business to attend to, so he vanished in a flash. "Wait, Fred. Since when is Percy a prefect? I had no idea." "Are you having a laugh, George? He's only mentioned it about 1,000,000 times this summer." The twins roared in unison. "He's been going on about it constantly." Right on cue, Percy appeared out of nowhere, already changed into his new robes. He wore his sternest expression. "If I were you, Fred and George, I would show a little restraint and not embarrass your brother in front of everyone, now that he is a prefect." "Merlin's beard, Fred. I'm terrified." "I know, George. It's terrifying. He sounds like he's already the headmaster." "You too." Percy took a deep breath and decided to ignore them. He walked over and patted Warren on the shoulder, making a grand show of adjusting his new robes so Warren couldn't miss the shiny P badge pinned to his chest. "Warren, dear brother, if you run into any trouble at school, just come find me." Warren nodded with a smile. "Sure, Percy." Just then, Arthur and Molly arrived with Ginny and Ron. It was nearly 11, and the white steam pouring from the train was thickening. The train was about to leave. Molly had to say goodbye to each of her children one by one. When she reached Warren and Ron, she dabbed at her eyes and pulled them both into a hug so tight they could barely breathe. "You've never been away from home this long before." "Don't worry, Mum." Warren patted her arm gently. "We're just going to school. Besides, Hogwarts is the safest place in the whole world. At least for now," he thought. "We'll write to you and Dad as soon as we get there. We'll write to Ginny too." After soothing his mother, Warren turned to hug Ginny. She was already in tears, clutching his robes as if she would never let go. "Warren, I don't want you to go. I have to go to school, Ginny. But you'll be at Hogwarts next year. It won't be for long." It took a while to calm her down. Ron hadn't said a word through any of this. He was crying too, his nose running like a tap. Waving goodbye to Arthur, Molly, and Ginny, Warren and Ron pushed their trunks onto the train and started looking for an empty compartment. The front of the train was off-limits, reserved for older students. Percy had already bragged about having a prefect's compartment up there. So they headed toward the back. They finally found an empty compartment near the back of the train. A long whistle blew, and the train lurched forward. Ron dropped his trunk and scrambled to the window, pressing his face against the glass as he tried to catch one last glimpse of his parents. But he saw nothing. Steam had already swallowed the platform, and through the haze, he could only make out a sea of waving hands. He slumped back into his seat, looking utterly defeated. Warren withdrew his wand and levitated their trunks onto the overhead racks with a casual flick. Seeing Ron's dejection, he hesitated for a moment before pulling a piece of candy from his pocket. "Here." Ron blinked, then took it. He unwrapped the sweet and muttered, "Thanks, Warren. Just call me brother." Warren ruffled his hair playfully, instantly dispelling any trace of gratitude Ron might have felt. Ron's face turned red. He flailed his arms, trying to escape Warren's grip. "No way." Just then the compartment door slid open. A small, skinny kid stood wrestling with a huge trunk, looking uncertain. "Excuse me, can I sit here?" Harry Potter thought this was the worst day of his life. To start with, his aunt and uncle dumped him at the station and drove off, leaving him unable to find platform 9 3/4. Eventually, a kind woman stepped in to guide him there. After battling his way through the crowd, he barely managed to board the train before it pulled out, but now he faced a new problem. He could not find an empty compartment. He tried the front of the train first, but older students with silver and green badges chased him out. He walked the length of the train to the back, yet every compartment was packed. He searched for a seat to no avail. Then he spotted the two red-headed boys. He recognized them. They were from that family that had helped him outside the station. Their bright red hair was impossible to forget, especially the tall one with the reddish-brown eyes that looked almost like gemstones. His name was Warren. He was the best-looking boy Harry had ever seen, better looking than any of the movie stars Aunt Petunia was always going on about. But what really stuck in Harry's mind was what he'd just witnessed through the glass. Warren was waving his wand and making the luggage float. Magic! Harry couldn't explain what had come over him. He'd slid the door open on impulse, but now that he'd spoken, he wanted nothing more than to run. He was just a stranger intruding on the two brothers. What if they didn't want company? What if they told him to get lost? His mind raced with worry. Growing up with the Dursleys had taught him to tread carefully and to always expect rejection. Inside the compartment, Warren was momentarily surprised. He had assumed Harry would have found a seat elsewhere by now. He glanced from Harry to Ron. The magical world was steeped in destiny, a force woven into the very fabric of their reality. Was this the precise moment the Golden Trio was fated to unite? He considered the question briefly before deciding such mysteries were beyond his current understanding. Maintaining a composed expression, he smiled at Harry. "Of course. Come in." Harry looked faintly embarrassed. He mumbled his thanks and turned to haul his trunk inside. Before he could begin to struggle, he heard the incantation for a spell. Wingardium Leviosa. His trunk rose into the air and floated effortlessly through the door. Hedwig hooted indignantly, flapping her wings wildly inside her cage, but her protests went unheeded. Harry spun around. Warren stood there with a knobby wand in hand, guiding the trunk up onto the luggage rack. With a subtle flick of his wrist, he settled Hedwig's cage gently on the small table by the window. A massive cat already occupied the spot. It cast a glance of mild disinterest at Hedwig before turning its gaze back to the rat in the corner cage. Harry was completely stunned. He could barely get the words out. Finally, he stammered, "Thanks. Thanks a lot." "You're welcome. Come in and sit down." Warren smiled. I'm Warren Weasley. This is my brother, Ron Weasley. Hello, Harry Potter. Harry hunched his shoulders nervously and stepped inside. Hello, Warren. His eyes grew wide. How did you know? Warren pointed at his own forehead. I saw your scar outside the station. So it wasn't magic, then? Harry relaxed a little. He was just about to speak when the freckled boy, Ron Weasley, practically jumped to his feet, staring at Harry's forehead. Harry Potter? The Harry Potter. Equals. Chapter 11, Harry Potter. Chapter 11, Harry Potter. Harry hated being the center of attention. It was especially aggravating when anyone who recognized him immediately wanted to inspect the scar on his forehead. It made him feel like a zoo exhibit. Yet he never found the courage to say no. Maybe it was just an easy way to break the ice. So when he noticed Ron staring intently at his brow, he brushed his hair aside to let him see Merlin's beard. Ron breathed the words like a prayer, his eyes still fixed on Harry's forehead. Harry felt his cheeks flush. Warren tapped Ron on the head with his wand. Ron yelped and clutched his head. What was that for? For being rude. I was just curious. Embarrassed, Ron turned away and stared out the window. Harry sat down awkwardly beside him. His eyes darted around the compartment, searching for a safe place to rest his gaze, before finally settling on the wand in Warren's hand. The Weasleys had helped him twice now, and Harry felt they were decent people. His nerves settled a fraction. As he watched, his curiosity eventually got the better of him. Warren? Do you mind if I call you that? Warren nodded as he stroked Milo's fur. Of course, Harry. What was that thing you just did? The levitation charm. It's a basic spell used to make things float. It's in our first year textbook. That's amazing. Harry's green eyes widened. Then his face fell. I've been trying to learn magic for a month, but I haven't managed to do a single thing. Warren shrugged. I've been practicing spells at home since I was 8. You grew up with muggles, Harry. Don't compare yourself to me. Loads of muggleborns are in the same boat. He didn't mention that he had mastered the levitation charm after only 2 tries. There was no need to show off in front of a kid. Harry felt a little better. He was about to step into a whole new world, yet he was terrified of falling behind before he even started. Then he realized he had been ignoring Ron. He hurriedly tried to draw him into the conversation. Ron, I bet you know loads of spells too. Ron didn't say a word. Harry watched Ron's face slowly turn a bright shade of red. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Across from them, Warren burst out laughing. Harry realized he had made a huge mistake. It was incredibly awkward. Just then, the compartment door slid open once more. A smiling woman with dimples asked, "Anything from the trolley, dears?" She was pushing a cart that was absolutely piled high with sweets. Harry shot up from his seat. He had never had friends before and wasn't sure how to act around kids his own age. He figured buying them sweets was a good place to start. Besides, he had money, more than he'd ever had in his life. When Harry returned, his arms overflowing with candy, he immediately caught Ron's attention. Ron stared as Harry dumped the entire pile onto the seat and enthusiastically urged them to dig in. Go on, help yourselves. I bought loads. I can't eat all this by myself. Ron tried to be polite. Mum packed sandwiches. But Warren was already happily tearing into a pack of pumpkin pasties. He wasn't a child. If he ate Harry's sweets, he could always make it up to him later. When he saw Warren helping himself, Ron reluctantly reached for a cauldron cake and took a bite. Harry was absolutely delighted. In all his 11 years, he had never truly shared food with anyone. He had never had enough to share, and there had never been anyone there to share it with. It felt wonderful. Harry and Ron talked as they ate, warming up to one another quickly. They chatted about chocolate frog cards and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans. Warren chimed in every now and then. For the most part, however, he simply watched them with a faint smile, his thoughts racing in the background. He had often wondered in his past life what might have become of Harry. Considering his terrible upbringing, if Harry had never met Ron or Hermione, the outcome seemed obvious. He would have either been corrupted by the endless attention and turned into a vain celebrity, or he would have spiraled down the same dark path as Voldemort. But that was merely a hypothesis. In reality, right here on this train to Hogwarts, at the turning point of his life, Harry had found two lifelong friends. They would fill the hollow spaces in his heart with genuine affection. Dumbledore always said love was the most powerful force in magic. However, in Warren's opinion, destiny was the true force to be reckoned with. He intended to seize it with both hands. He traced a finger along his wand and gazed out the window. The train had just passed the final stretch of tidy, cultivated farmland. The fields extending toward the horizon were growing wilder, giving way to dark mountain shadows, scattered forests, and winding rivers. After a long while, the compartment door slid open for the third time. A round-faced boy stood crying. "Excuse me, have you seen a toad? His name is Trevor. I've lost him." Harry and Ron shook their heads. "I'll help you look." Warren stood up. "Come on, Milo. Sniff him out." Milo jumped down from the table and followed him. The round-faced boy wiped his nose, looking grateful. "Thanks, really. I'm Neville. Neville Longbottom." "No problem. Call me Warren." Warren wasn't being completely selfless. He just wanted an excuse to stretch his legs and give his brother and Harry a chance to bond. As Warren left with Neville, Harry sighed. "Your brother is really nice, Ron." Ron's face scrunched up. "He isn't. He's scared me loads of times ever since we were little. And Fred and George are just as bad." Harry shook his head. "He's your brother. Of course he plays jokes on you. But look at how he treated me and that other kid. Before today, I thought all brothers were like Dudley." They had talked about Dudley earlier. Harry had described him as nothing less than a demon in human form. By comparison, Ron actually started to think Warren seemed like an angel. He began to brag a little. "Well, he's not that bad, I guess. Actually, aside from scaring me all the time, Warren's great at everything. He's been brewing potions since he was 8. Everyone has heard of him. He's a famous genius. Plus, he makes the most money in our whole family. Look, he even bought me my new wand." Harry watched as Ron held up his wand like a precious treasure. He felt a sharp pang of envy. No one had ever given him a gift like that. Meanwhile, completely unaware that his brother was singing his praises, Warren located Trevor with Milo's assistance. He sent a tearfully grateful Neville on his way and was about to head back when someone called his name. "Warren Weasley." He turned. Not far away, Hermione Granger stood, her bushy hair framing her face as she stared at him, her eyes practically glowing. Chapter 12, A Lesson. Chapter 12, A Lesson. Hermione Granger was absolutely thrilled. Yet mere moments ago, she had been a nervous wreck. When Professor McGonagall had appeared at their home and performed a few transfigurations right in front of her family, Hermione's entire worldview had been fundamentally shaken. However, fascination had swiftly taken over. She had always believed in science, and science dictated that anything that exists must have a rational explanation. But she was also smart enough to recognize that being Muggle-born was her greatest vulnerability. This was especially true after the day in Diagon Alley when she had seen Warren Weasley perform magic with a mere snap of his fingers. She had learned from Professor McGonagall that he was actually a year younger than she was. It was terrifying. Children raised in wizarding families began practicing magic practically from the cradle. Meanwhile, she had squandered nearly 12 years. It felt as though she were trailing a century behind every single one of her classmates. She had spent the entire summer devouring textbooks and drilling spells with a frantic desperation. Teaching herself magic was a grueling task. As the start of term approached, Hermione's anxiety mounted. The moment she boarded the Hogwarts Express, she eagerly sought out students from wizarding families, hoping to pump them for information. Her first attempt proved successful. She shared a compartment with a girl named Susan Bones, who was friendly and approachable. Almost everyone in their carriage knew her aunt was Amelia Bones, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Perfect. But when Hermione cast a simple mending charm and attempted to discuss the theory behind it, Susan stopped talking to her completely. Next, she tracked down the Weasley redhead at the back of the train, Ron Weasley. The boy she had briefly met was showing off his new wand to Harry Potter. The compartment contained both a Weasley and the boy who lived, famous from modern magical history. It was too good an opportunity to miss. She had urged Ron to perform a spell. The results spoke for themselves. Finally, Hermione had cornered Neville Longbottom. The round-faced boy, whom she had practically grabbed, was sobbing and laughing while kissing a toad. Honestly, it made her question the quality of wizarding education entirely. "I can't do magic. If it weren't for my Hogwarts letter, my family would have been convinced I was a squib." Neville quivered beneath her intense gaze. "You grew up in the wizarding world. How can you not know any spells? If you really want to know, why don't you ask Warren Weasley? He's right over there. He just helped me find Trevor." Warren Weasley. The name had haunted Hermione's nightmares all summer. But after today's efforts, having finally gauged the abilities of her classmates, she could finally hold her head high. Following Neville's directions, she rounded a corner and spotted a familiar, tall, red-haired figure. He was strolling down the corridor, casually twirling his wand. Warren Weasley. Strangely, despite her confidence, the moment she called his name and he turned to fully reveal his handsome face, her heart began to race. Thump, thump. It felt as if it were trying to leap out of her throat. Was this the aura of a rival? For a girl whose mind was usually occupied by nothing but her studies, the ringing in her ears was overwhelming. Warren, however, wasn't surprised to see Hermione. The Hogwarts Express only had so many carriages. He nodded with a smile. "Hello, Miss Granger." Before approaching him, Hermione had prepared a whole speech. Challenge him to a duel. Tell him she'd read all his papers and knew about his achievements in potions. But faced with his greeting, her mind went completely blank. She could only reply stiffly, "Hello, Mr. Weasley. Is something the matter, Miss Granger?" Hermione opened her mouth to speak, but someone bumped into her from behind and shoved her aside. A boy with pale platinum blonde hair and a pointed face stood there, flanked by two large, hulking thugs. His expression was pure arrogant contempt. "Out of my way, you little mudblood." Without even glancing at Hermione, whom he'd nearly knocked over, he looked Warren up and down and sneered. "Another Weasley. I just saw one, dirty and stupid, hanging around Potter and his glasses. You're even stranger than him." He finally deigned to glance at Hermione, then quickly looked away, as if a second more would contaminate him. "And you're friends with this? Hair like seaweed, teeth like a rabbit." He didn't get to finish. Warren cut him off. "Draco Malfoy." Malfoy looked surprised for a moment, then puffed out his chest. "Yes. At least you're more knowledgeable than that idiot Ron." Warren shrugged. "If I were you, I'd get lost. There's no mummy or daddy here to protect you on this train." A faint flush crept up Malfoy's pale cheeks, and his eyes widened. He waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, so you want to fight? Crab, Goyle, get him." His two dim-witted cronies seemed eager for the task. Grinning, they lunged at Warren with a roar. Hermione barely had time to gasp before she saw Warren raise his wand. Impedimenta. The air in front of them seemed to thicken. Crabbe and Goyle charged into an invisible sticky bog. Their movements slowed to a crawl. An unseen force seized them, lifted them off the ground, and splayed their limbs out like frogs pinned to a lab table. They screamed in panic. Draco, help! They'd picked the wrong person to call. Draco barely had time to look frightened before Warren calmly pointed his wand at him. Red light flared. Expelliarmus! Bam! A tremendous force slammed into Draco's stomach. The corridor walls blurred past him. A moment later, he crashed heavily into the partition. Dazed from the impact, his mind blank, he had no time to react. Another spell hit him before he could recover. Densagio. Draco felt a tingling sensation in his mouth. He stared, wide-eyed, as his front teeth rapidly grew, extending past his lips and curling upward in a grotesque curve. The shock was too much. He burst into tears. He didn't wait for Crabbe and Goyle. He scrambled to his feet and fled toward the back of the train. Students from nearby compartments poked their heads out to watch the commotion. Warren lifted the spell on Crabbe and Goyle, and they fled in tears, chasing after their master. Chapter 13, Hogwarts. Chapter 13, Hogwarts. To Warren, teaching Draco Malfoy a lesson was a trivial matter. But for Hermione, it stirred strange, unfamiliar emotions she struggled to understand. She watched Warren approach. She had rehearsed 1,000 ways to thank him, but for some reason, she ended up stammering out a reprimand. You shouldn't have used spells like that against them. What if they report you? She regretted the words the moment they left her lips. Warren didn't seem to mind, though. He simply smiled. At least they won't be bothering us for the next few hours. I'm heading back to my compartment. See you later, Miss Granger. Merlin. What is wrong with you, Hermione Granger? Hermione had the urge to smack herself. As Warren turned to walk away, she finally blurted out, "Thank you for earlier. You can call me Hermione." Warren nodded. "All right, Hermione. You can call me Warren." He raised his wand, just as he had the first time they met, and a subtle current of magic washed through her hair. This time, it didn't frizz up. Instead, it became smooth and sleek, falling softly against her cheeks. He smiled at her. "Don't listen to Malfoy. You really are very pretty." Hermione felt as if her brain had just overheated. Her face burned bright red. Draco Malfoy's foul mood lifted considerably after he had his fun with the girl. He hummed a light tune all the way back to his compartment. Before he even opened the door, he could hear Ron bragging inside. "I heard what happened. Warren absolutely flattened Malfoy. I bet he hit him with some right nasty curses. Did you see his teeth? They looked like a warthog's. Maybe they'll stay like that forever." Harry's shaky, excited whisper followed. "What sort of curse is powerful enough to do that? Who knows? Warren is always messing with strange things. He's got a mean streak. I wouldn't be surprised if he used an unforgivable curse on him." Warren rolled his eyes. He slid the door open, and as the two boys stared at him in shock, he pointed his wand at Ron. "Ea!" Ron screamed, scaring Harry half to death. Before Harry could react, Ron had scrambled behind him, using him as a human shield. His movements were so practiced it was almost sad. But why did he have to be the shield? Having successfully terrorized his brother, Warren turned his attention to other matters. He took a seat, pulled out a potions textbook, and began to read intently. Harry glanced at Ron, whose face was now nearly as pale as Malfoy's, and stifled a laugh. Ron felt humiliated, but he didn't dare say a word. He simply glared at Harry. Before long, the two new friends were whispering together again, discussing whatever caught their interest. Nothing else of note occurred for the remainder of the journey. The twins stopped by once, knowing exactly how to stay in their benefactor's good graces. After greeting Harry, they mentioned they had borrowed a camera from an older student. They planned to take pictures of Draco Malfoy's miserable state and distribute them to the whole school, intending to publicize their dear brother's glorious achievement. Twilight deepened, and the Hogwarts Express finally began to slow. By the time the train came to a stop, the world outside was completely dark. A voice echoed through the carriages. "We have reached Hogwarts. Please leave your luggage on the train. It will be delivered to your dormitories." Warren had ensured that Harry and Ron changed into their robes well over 10 minutes ago. They stood nervously behind Warren. Harry kept wiping his sweaty palms on his robes. Ron's freckles stood out sharply against his pale face. Their imaginations ran wild with every rumor they had ever heard about the sorting. When the train finally stopped, Harry and Ron instinctively followed Warren, their minds blank. It wasn't until they were jostled off the train onto a small, dark platform that the biting wind woke them up. Hagrid, the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts, held a lantern high and scanned the crowd of first years. "First years? First years over here. You all right there, Harry?" Even Hagrid's beaming smile couldn't warm Harry up. Seeing Ron clutching Warren's robes tightly, he grabbed on as well. Warren glanced back at them. "Not so tight," he whispered. They both shook their heads vigorously but didn't let go. The older students dispersed quickly. Hagrid called out a few more times to ensure all the first years were accounted for, then led the way, holding his lantern high. They followed a steep, narrow, and pitch-black path. No one spoke. They could see nothing but the lantern bobbing ahead of them as they stumbled forward, trying not to fall behind. Then Warren raised his wand. Lumos. A soft glow pushed back the darkness. The first years, their faces suddenly visible, crowded around Warren like chicks around a mother hen. They walked on in silence for a while. Then, rounding a corner, the narrow path opened up before them. Ahead, at the end of the path, lay a vast, ink-black lake that stretched all the way to the foot of a mountain. Perched atop that mountain was a magnificent castle with towers clustered together and countless windows glowing with warm, welcoming light in the darkness. Warren had to admit, the view was absolutely breathtaking. Hagrid led them down to the shore, where a fleet of small boats waited. No more than 4 to a boat. No crowding now. Warren, Harry, and Ron got into a boat. Other first years tried to squeeze in with them. Warren called out, "Hermione! Over here!" Fortunately, the darkness concealed Hermione's blush. She hurried over and climbed in, doing her best to act casual. Ron glared at her the entire time. Harry, however, was pleased to have another person he knew sharing the boat. Once all the first years were settled, Hagrid shouted an order. The fleet of boats moved out, gliding smoothly across the glassy lake. As they drew closer to the mountain and the towering castle, the cliffs appeared to rise endlessly above them, suspended in the night air. The sheer scale of the sight took their breath away. Not a word was spoken. Hagrid guided them ashore. They walked up a gravel path and a flight of stone steps to a huge oak door. Hagrid raised his massive fist and knocked 3 times. The door swung open. A familiar figure stood there. The first years, Professor McGonagall. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." Professor McGonagall wore her usual stern expression. Under her sharp gaze, the first years quickly stopped fidgeting and followed her meekly. Warren, however, glanced around with curiosity as they passed through a doorway into a stone hall. The walls were stark and lit by flaming torches. Stone figures, like saints resting in niches, lined the walls, rising toward a ceiling lost in darkness. The atmosphere felt ancient and solemn. Beyond this, they entered a vast, magnificent chamber ablaze with torchlight. A marble staircase spiraled upward, connecting to the upper floors of the castle. Chapter 14, The Sorting Ceremony. Chapter 14, The Sorting Ceremony. A low buzz of conversation drifted from behind a door to the right. Yet Professor McGonagall did not lead them inside. Instead, she stopped and turned, her stern gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she began. "The opening banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are at Hogwarts, your house will be like your family within the school. You will have classes with your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend your free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each has its own noble history and has produced outstanding witches and wizards." Professor McGonagall's gaze lingered on Malfoy. The spell had worn off, yet he looked far from well. His eyes were red and swollen, his robes disheveled, as if he had been mauled by a troll. She paused, then fixed a stern glare on Warren. "I am aware of an incident on the train today, a very unpleasant one. I trust it will be the last. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, whereas rule-breaking will lose points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, which is a great honor. I hope you will each be a credit to whichever house becomes yours." Warren met her glare with a look of total innocence, as if nothing had happened. The deputy headmistress's eye twitched slightly. She continued addressing the first years, who were now thoroughly terrified. "The sorting ceremony will begin shortly. I suggest you tidy yourselves up while you wait. You will be on display." With that, she turned and walked through the doors into the Great Hall. The nervous crowd let out a collective breath. Draco Malfoy frantically smoothed his hair and straightened his robes. Harry and Ron patted down each other's hair. Hermione pressed her lips together and gently touched her sleek hair. Everyone else hurriedly tried to make themselves presentable. Moments later, someone gasped. Warren looked up. 24 ghosts, pearly white and semi-transparent, were gliding through the wall toward them. They murmured amongst themselves, some looking kindly and others agitated, while a few attempted to speak with the first years. The first years held their breath once more. No one dared speak. Warren found them fascinating. In his past life, while reading the books, he had always wondered about the true nature of ghosts. However, now was not the time for philosophical questions. The ghosts drifted away when Professor McGonagall returned. She swept her gaze over the first years once more. "Everything is ready. Form a single file and follow me." The first years hurried to obey, following her through the open doors into the Great Hall. They walked between the 4 long house tables, already filled with older students watching them with curiosity and scrutiny. Warren spotted Percy, Fred, and George waving at him and Ron. Warren smiled back. Ron was too nervous to even notice them. Warren knew the ceiling of the Great Hall mirrored the night sky, casting a soft, serene light over them. At the front of the line, a rickety old stool stood holding a patched, frayed witch's hat. The hat began to sing. Warren kept his expression neutral. He silently cast a spell to block his ears, holding the charm until the hat stopped writhing and Professor McGonagall stepped forward with her scroll. Then he lifted the spell. Hannah Abbott. A familiar name. One by one, the first years stepped forward, sat on the stool, and were sorted by the hat. Hermione was among the first people Warren recognized. She trotted up to the stool, and the hat was placed on her head. After a moment's thought, it shouted, "Gryffindor." Next came Harry. He was sorted into Gryffindor as well. The moment the hat made the announcement, the entire Gryffindor table erupted. Everyone pounded the tables and cheered. Warren cast a glance toward the staff table. Professor Snape's face, already severe, darkened further. Dumbledore, however, beamed behind his half-moon spectacles, his ancient face crinkling with genuine delight. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Warren smiled as well. The legend of the boy who lived was truly beginning. The most formidable forces in the magical world were about to launch their shadow war around him. Warren was content to watch and explore from nearby. At last, they reached the W.S. Ron was called early because of his initials. With all eyes fixed on him, he seemed to forget how to walk, nearly tripping over his own feet on his way to the stool. The moment the hat touched his head, it screamed, "Gryffindor!" Applause erupted from the Gryffindor table. Percy was loudly proclaiming to anyone who would listen, "That's my brother," while Fred and George jumped up and down, whistling in delight. When Professor McGonagall called out Warren Weasley, they slammed the table with even greater force. "Warren, Warren! Gryffindor, Gryffindor!" The other lions, swept up in the twins' enthusiasm, joined in the cheering. Amidst the applause, Warren walked toward the stool, his occlumency shields raised. He gave a silent sigh. Sorry, Fred and George. Over the years, he had come to understand his nature quite well. His thirst for knowledge, pursuit of power, and ambition were undeniable. He knew he stood no chance of being sorted into Gryffindor. The moment the hat touched his head, a small voice whispered in his ear. Excellent, truly excellent occlumency. You can't fool me, you know. I hold the collective knowledge and wisdom of the four founders. Those who master occlumency usually have hidden depths and great secrets. A cunning child. 2 houses are clearly not for you. I shall put you in Slytherin. When the hat shouted its decision, the festive atmosphere at the Gryffindor table came to an abrupt halt. Percy, leaning forward, froze mid-motion. Fred and George tumbled off the bench they had been bouncing on. Hermione gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Harry and Ron stared wide-eyed. Even Professor McGonagall, who knew Warren by reputation, couldn't help but turn to look at Dumbledore. The greatest wizard of the age gazed steadily at Warren's back, his expression thoughtful. For a moment, the entire Great Hall was silent. Then Dumbledore cleared his throat softly, signaling Professor McGonagall to continue. Looking slightly flustered, she helped Warren remove the hat. The other students gradually recovered from their shock. They stared at Warren's unmistakable Weasley red hair and whispered among themselves, the murmur growing into a loud buzz. Warren ignored it all. He focused on the system panel before him. Main Quest 1, Enter Hogwarts, completed. Reward, 1 Affinity Point 50 Mana Level. Claim Reward. Equals. Chapter 15, The Welcome Feast. Chapter 15, The Welcome Feast. The Great Hall was packed. It wasn't just students filling the space, the entire teaching staff was present as well, including Dumbledore and all the heads of house. Every single one of them was an incredibly powerful wizard. And somewhere in the castle, likely clinging to the back of a professor's head, a noseless freak with a grudge was barely surviving. Warren glanced toward the staff table, quickly spotting the man in the purple turban. This was definitely not the right time to claim his reward. That could wait until he was alone. He dismissed the system panel. Ignoring the whispers and pointed stares from every corner of the hall, he walked calmly over to the Slytherin table. Thump! The loud crash silenced the room for a moment. Draco Malfoy had fallen off the bench. His face, already pale, had turned completely white. He scrambled up from the floor, not daring to look at Warren. His whole body trembled as he tried to scurry to the other end of the table. Hi, Draco! Draco froze mid-step. He turned around stiffly. WWW Weasley, sir. You can call me Warren. We are in the same house now, so I hope we get along. Warren patted him on the shoulder, and Draco flinched as if struck by a curse. He tried to smile, but the muscles in his face refused to cooperate. The result was a truly wretched grimace. He glanced at Crabbe and Goyle, his two cowardly thugs, who had their heads buried in their arms on the table, teeth chattering loudly. At that moment, an older student wearing a prefect badge leaned in, clearly unable to stand it any longer. "Hey, Weasley! Sit down and stop causing trouble." Warren looked him over. The student was big and burly with a completely forgettable face. Warren smiled. "Sure thing, Prefect." The prefect nodded, satisfied. He began to clap, prompting the others to welcome Warren to the table. The other Slytherins exchanged glances but clapped along, half-heartedly, out of respect for the prefect. They were actually applauding a red-haired Weasley, a boy they regarded as a traitor to pure-blood families. Warren paid it no mind. He smiled and sat down beside Malfoy. The applause from the Slytherin table broke the tension. Professor McGonagall cleared her throat. "Silence, please. The sorting ceremony will continue." Nothing else of note occurred. The sorting concluded quickly. Dumbledore rose, appearing entirely unperturbed. He delivered a few remarks of vague profundity before announcing the feast. Food materialized instantly on the tables. Honestly, the spread was underwhelming. There was certainly plenty of meat, but the main dishes were dull. Potatoes appeared in every conceivable form. After years of a diet revolving around them, the mere sight of them was enough to ruin Warren's appetite. "My dear Draco, I believe Professor McGonagall was right. Now that we are in the same house, we ought to be like family." Warren picked up a roast lamb chop, a favorite from his past life, and nibbled on it slowly. "So, I have decided to forgive your rudeness on the train. Let's get along from now on, shall we?" Draco stared blankly. Was this really his life? He looked at the delicious food before him. He wanted to eat until he forgot everything, stuffing himself until he couldn't move, then fall asleep and wake to find it had all been a nightmare. Unfortunately. "Draco, pass the pudding." Proper Yorkshire pudding. I love it." "Draco, pass the lamb chops." "Oh, not eating? A few potatoes will cheer you up, Draco. Don't look so glum all the time. Give us a smile." "Look, Draco, you're so popular. Even the Slytherin ghost wants to sit next to you." "Ah, Mr. Ghost, what is your name?" A ghost drifted over, covered in silvery bloodstains. His face was vacant, his presence cold and menacing. It was the Bloody Baron. Every word he spoke seemed to drip with blood. Draco, having nervously stuffed himself with potatoes, could not stand it any longer. He clamped his hand over his mouth and bolted for the side door leading to the bathrooms. When he returned, he looked utterly drained, his face nearly as pale as the ghost's. The Slytherin prefects were responsible for leading the first years to their dormitories. The boy prefect was the same one who had scolded Warren earlier. He had introduced himself, but Warren hadn't bothered to remember his name. Honestly, aside from Malfoy and Astoria Greengrass, who wouldn't start until the following year, Warren saw no reason to commit any of the current Slytherin students to memory. They were either dim-witted, brainwashed by their families, or simply unattractive. Back when he read the books in his past life, he had always wondered what kind of misfits Slytherin managed to collect. The unfortunate-looking, burly prefect led the first years down to the Slytherin common room. It was located in the dungeons, with windows overlooking the Black Lake. The room held a certain charm, but they were called the dungeons for a reason. After giving the standard rundown of house rules in the common room, the prefect seemed rather pleased with himself. Having successfully intimidated Warren at the feast, he now clapped him hard on the shoulder. "Weasley, I do not care what your problem is with Malfoy. But in Slytherin and at Hogwarts, you follow my rules. I expect you to show Malfoy more respect. You are both pure-bloods, but the Weasleys have long since fallen from grace." "Prefect." Warren cut him off with a smile. "Before you lecture me, I actually have a question about a spell. The prefect frowned. Weasley, is that how your penny-pinching parents taught you manners? The spell is called. Warren raised his wand, his expression turning cold. The prefect finally realized something was wrong. He fumbled for his wand, but he was too slow to cast. Expelliarmus. A streak of red light shot out. The prefect's bulky form flew backward. Splat! He slammed into the large window separating the common room from the lake before slowly sliding down. The first-year Slytherins and the older students stared in shock. They watched dumbfounded as Warren cast another spell. Stupefy. The prefect went limp. Warren nudged the prefect's head with his foot, then pulled a piece of parchment from his pocket. It was the dormitory assignment list. Warren found his name. He swept his gaze calmly over the crowd, finally settling on Malfoy. Draco, did you see what just happened? Malfoy shuddered violently. No. No, that's not good enough. You saw this boy, whatever his name is, raise his wand at me. I was forced to defend myself. Do you understand? Malfoy caught on and nodded frantically. Good. Warren's gaze swept the room again. His wand remained in his hand. No one dared to move. He nodded politely. Good night, then, gentlemen. With that, he turned and left. Chapter 16, Increasing Affinities. Chapter 16, Increasing Affinities. Warren found his dormitory using the list on the parchment. Although Slytherin dorms usually housed 4 students, the arrangements varied with the number of first years. Warren had lucked out, as only 3 were assigned to his room. The other 2 were unremarkable, and Warren paid them no mind. If they had any sense, they would move out soon enough. The moment he pushed open the door, the large orange and gold cat launched herself at him. Her front paws landed on his chest, and she rubbed her head vigorously against his chin. All right, Milo, you clingy little thing. You're getting too heavy. Meow. Hungry? Sorry, I couldn't bring you to the feast. Okay, stop rubbing. I'll get you some treats, and you can have breakfast with me tomorrow morning. Warren laughed, soothing the demanding cat. In his past life, he had been an ordinary office worker in a big city with neither the time nor the energy for a pet. He had bought Milo primarily because she was intelligent, hoping she would help him keep an eye on Scabbers. However, as time passed, he had grown to truly love this affectionate, oversized sweetheart. If he could feel this way about a cat, what about his family? Warren thought of Percy, Fred, George, and Ron, recalling the shock on their faces when he was sorted into Slytherin. He winced. What would his parents think? But there was nothing he could do. He was a transmigrator with the mind and ambitions of an adult. Thank goodness the starter pack had granted him max-level occlumency. Otherwise, never mind his secret as a transmigrator, his adult thoughts alone would have terrified the Sorting Hat. Even the most naturally cruel child, limited by their experience and immature worldview, still retained some innocence and foolishness. An adult with a fully formed moral compass was different. Their actions might be constrained by law, but their thoughts could not. The casual cruelty inherent in an adult's every thought would likely be enough to land them in Azkaban. Pushing those thoughts aside, Warren stroked Milo's fur and issued a silent command, "System, claim reward." Several lines of information appeared before him. Claiming reward. +1 free affinity point. +50 mana level. The air shimmered with a faint ripple of magic. Milo noticed the shift and glanced up at Warren. Seeing nothing amiss, she returned to her treats. Warren opened his system panel. Host, Warren Weasley. Mana level, 432, average adult wizard, 500. Affinities, Charms 7, Dark Arts 6, Transfiguration 7, Potions 10, Herbology 6, Divination 2, max, 10. Spells, Occlumency LV5, max, Shield Charm LV3, 3/8, Disarming Charm LV2, 2/4, Levitation Charm LV2, 1/4, Full Body Bind LV2, 1/4, Fire Making Charm LV2, 2/4, Wand Lighting Charm LV3, 0/4. Potions, Elixir of Happiness, Invigoration Draft, Blood Replenishing Potion, Sleekiazi's Potion, Hair Raising Potion, Beauty Potion, Master Level, includes multiple formulas. Reputation Points, 17. Free Affinity Points, 1. New quest available. Check for details. Warren examined his statistics. It had been roughly 2 months since his Hogwarts letter arrived. In that time, his mana level had increased by 62 points. 50 came from the reward he had just claimed, while the remaining 12 resulted from natural growth over the 2 months. Based on the standard values listed in parentheses, Warren had already devised a theory regarding the natural development of a witch or wizard's magic. There was no universal template, as magic awakened and manifested at different times for every child. However, he was certain that natural growth was tied to magical affinity. The higher the affinity, the greater the magical gain each month. Once again, there was no hard and fast rule. Warren suspected that the primary affinities driving growth were charms, the dark arts, and transfiguration, whereas the others had a comparatively negligible effect. Perhaps there were developmental variables involved as well. He had watched his brothers closely over the years, yet he still couldn't determine a reliable metric based solely on his own circumstances. Magic was rarely that simple. Nevertheless, boosting his affinities was undoubtedly the correct path. It would directly affect how quickly he learned, mastered, and developed new magic. Warren took a moment to acclimate to the sudden surge in magical power. Once he was certain he had it under control, he turned his attention to his affinities. He needed to decide where to allocate his new point. Judging by his comparisons with Percy, Fred, and George, along with the speed at which he learned spells, an affinity of 7 was pretty damn good. According to the books, that likely placed him around Hermione's level, perhaps even a little higher. For now, it was sufficient for learning spells. His affinity for the dark arts was somewhat low, but it wasn't as if he could learn much of that subject right now anyway. He frowned at the thought. The dark arts were not merely difficult to learn. Casting them required calling forth specific emotions. To use an unforgivable curse, you needed genuine murderous intent and malice. To use the Cruciatus curse, you needed cruelty and hatred. The dark wizards and Death Eaters who ended up unhinged and raving were not born that way. That madness was at least partly a consequence of their overuse of the dark arts. Warren rubbed his chin. Before he could delve into the dark arts, he needed to figure out how to avoid the inherent pitfalls. Dumbledore likely knew a method. Before his fixation on the power of love, the headmaster had been a master of the dark arts himself. However, there was no chance he would agree to teach a student such dangerous magic. There was someone else who had mastered the dark arts without losing his mind, Snape. The Slytherin head of house was both a potions master and a dark arts expert. He had invented Sectum Sempra while he was still a student. If Warren could get on his good side, he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It would be perfect. Dark arts was out. Herbology was out. Divination was his greatest weakness. Even if he boosted it, it would be useless. That option was out too. That just left Transfiguration. Transfiguration was the most complex and extensive discipline. It was not merely a collection of spells. It was a vast system of knowledge that overlapped with charms, the dark arts, and even potions. From the simplest transformation of inanimate objects to live targets, spell transfiguration, and human transfiguration, every step forward in transfiguration was a leap forward in every area. It was also the only branch of magic that, from the very beginning, did not require incantations. Warren stopped debating with himself. He allocated his free affinity point to transfiguration. The change was imperceptible, lacking the sudden surge of magical power he had felt previously. However, when Warren drew his wand and lightly touched one of Milo's treats, a sensation unlike anything he had ever experienced flooded his mind. His magic flowed into the treat like a gentle stream. It soaked into the snack, mapping out its innermost structure and feeding that information back to him. For the first time, the entire process felt smooth and lucid. The usual sluggishness and haziness were gone. With just a thought, he manipulated those internal structures effortlessly. Countless minute details became clear, allowing him to adjust them with silken ease, using his magic to impose his will upon reality. Pop! The treat transformed into a live mouse, wriggling in his palm. Milo's eyes went wide. She pounced. According to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration, you could not change the fundamental nature of something. That meant Milo was about to eat a mouse that tasted like fish. Meow. It was double the fun. Equals. Chapter 17, Dumbledore. Chapter 17, Dumbledore. Late at night, Hogwarts was empty and still. Any sound in the deep, dark corridors carried a long way. Snape's professorial robes trailed behind him as his shoes clicked hollowly on the stone floor. With his cold face and slightly cruel, hooked nose, he could scare any student caught out after hours. But he was not patrolling tonight. He climbed the winding staircase, passed a corridor lined with portraits and suits of armor, and arrived at the 7th floor landing. A grotesque stone gargoyle blocked his path. Behind the gargoyle was a moving spiral staircase that led to his destination, the headmaster's office. Snape stared at the gargoyle with a blank expression, his dark eyes looking at it like it was a piece of trash. Password: cockroach clusters. The gargoyle sprang aside. Snape climbed the stairs and pushed open the office door. The circular office was spacious and luxurious, filled with portraits of former headmasters. It was late, and most of them were snoring. Snape's entrance woke a few, who grumbled sleepily. "Ah, Severus!" Dumbledore looked up from his reading behind the enormous desk and greeted him warmly. "Good evening. Care for a cockroach cluster? Or perhaps a sugar quill?" A dish full of candy floated toward Snape. He pushed it aside irritably. His voice was practically a hiss. "What do you want? Get on with it. I do not have time to waste." Dumbledore's smile did not waver. He summoned the candy dish back, plucked a wriggling cockroach from it, and popped it into his mouth. He beckoned. "Come and see, Severus." Snape approached the desk. A letter lay spread out before Dumbledore, signed by Ollivander. "I wrote to Mr. Ollivander after the feast to ask him a few questions. I am glad my old friend still deigns to reply. He seems to be sleeping very little, however. I had expected his reply in the morning." He rambled on. Snape had no patience for this. His eyes scanned the parchment. Ollivander was describing a specific wand to Dumbledore. "I must admit, it is a wand of immense power. Only the most powerful witches and wizards can earn its favor and affection. I never imagined it would choose a child. Warren Weasley. It is beyond my comprehension. But Dumbledore, in response to your inquiry, I must maintain that neither wizard nor wand is fixed at birth. Wand and witch, wand and wizard, they grow together, shaping one another. I cannot offer definitive proof to substantiate your fears. I can only ask you to exercise caution. Your faithful servant, Garrick Ollivander." Snape's gaze fixed upon the name Warren Weasley. He glanced at Dumbledore, a trace of sarcasm passing over his cold features. "And what is this? Another budding dark wizard for your watch list?" Dumbledore's smile vanished. He fell silent for a moment. "I trust Arthur and Molly," he said. Snape interpreted that to mean he trusted Arthur and Molly, but as for this Warren, he was not so sure. "Humph! The answer did not surprise Snape. He let out a non-committal, cold laugh. So? Do I have a new task? Am I supposed to watch our dear savior and his evil classmate at the same time? I did not say he was evil, Severus. Humph. Dumbledore sighed. The timing is unfortunate, Severus. We must monitor Harry's progress and ensure he fulfills the prophecy. I am not shirking my responsibility. We simply do not know what would happen if destiny were altered. Would it be for the better, or for the worse? He gazed into Snape's dark eyes. He would not use legilimency on him. He simply wanted to ensure Snape recognized his sincerity. Help me. You saw, didn't you? Harry's eyes. They're like lilies. Enough. Snape's voice rose, losing control. His nostrils flared. A wave of emotion slammed into his chest, nearly shattering his occlumency shields. It was like poison. It had tortured him for 10 years. Silence hung in the office for a long moment. Finally Snape's voice returned to its usual coldness. If that is all, I have lesson plans to prepare. I look forward to tomorrow. I hope your savior is not shown up by his evil classmate. With that, he swept his robes around him and left quickly. Thank you, Severus. Sleep well. As Snape left, the office fell silent again. Dumbledore looked down at the letter, his thin fingers tracing each word, as if trying to imprint them on his memory. After an age, he spoke again. Armando, have you ever wondered what might have become of Tom if we had paid more attention to him at the start? A portrait of an old wizard feigning sleep turned over and muttered, who knows? Yes. Who knows? Equals. Chapter 18, How to Dismantle a Family's Defenses. Chapter 18, How to Dismantle a Family's Defenses. The next morning, Warren woke up naturally thanks to his internal clock, well rested and in a good mood. The other 2 Slytherins in his dorm had been smarter than he expected. They had only come back last night to pack their things before moving to another room. Having a whole room to himself was really comfortable. He got out of bed at 5 in the morning while it was still dark out. Warren washed up, changed into his robes, and left the dorm with Milo. As he passed through the common room, he did not see the prefect he had knocked out last night. He had probably been dragged away by his roommates. The fire was still roaring in the fireplace. It was the house elf's work, no doubt. Warren did not linger. He pushed open the stone door and left the Slytherin common room. It was too early. The undisciplined students were still asleep. Warren wandered the empty corridors and courtyards for a while before finding a path down to the Black Lake. He led Milo to the shore and patted her head. Go play. Milo bounded off, pouncing around on the grassy bank. Warren sat down, gazing lazily at the mirror-smooth lake, breathing in the crisp morning air. This was a good place to relax. If it stayed this quiet, he would come here often. After spending some time with Milo, the castle behind Warren began to hum with activity. As he headed back, the Great Hall was already filling with early risers. He spotted Hermione's bushy hair at the Gryffindor table from a distance. Milo recognized the girl she had met on the train and padded over. Hermione froze for a second, then seemed to recognize the cat. She turned quickly, and her eyes lit up upon seeing Warren. I have already memorized the timetable, Warren. Gryffindor and Slytherin have loads of classes together. I do not think the sorting matters at all. She gestured excitedly. Our first lesson today is Transfiguration. Have you prepared? I can lend you my notes if you want, or we could sit together in class. Breakfast had already been laid out on the 4 house tables in a lavish spread. It was the only British meal Warren actually enjoyed. In addition to the usual sausages and bacon, there were scrambled eggs, grilled tomatoes, and beans. Even the selection of bread was dizzying in its variety. Warren, wearing his silver and green Slytherin badge, sat brazenly at the Gryffindor table. He listened to Hermione chatter while he ate at a leisurely pace. Every Gryffindor who passed by did a double take, checking to ensure they had not wandered into the wrong place. Then, with strange expressions, they hurried away from the pair. The Slytherins at the nearby table kept glancing over. Word of Warren knocking out the prefect with 2 spells had spread through the house overnight. Apparently the prefect had been hit with such a powerful curse that his roommates could not counter it. They had had to rush him to Madame Pomfrey overnight. Everyone was re-evaluating this red-haired Weasley. This was probably the Slytherins' only good quality. They worshipped power and status. In their pure-blood upbringing, power and status were one and the same. Whoever was strong earned their respect. Why on earth was he sitting at the Gryffindor table? Was contrariness simply encoded in Weasley DNA? It was infuriating. While many Slytherins wanted a word with Warren, none dared approach him. Instead, they directed their glares toward the Gryffindors. The Gryffindors found the situation just as baffling. Out of deference to Percy, Fred, and George, they couldn't bring themselves to force Warren to leave. They retaliated with glares of their own. What should have been an ordinary breakfast had warped into a tense, silent standoff between the rival houses. Unsurprisingly, the drama caught the attention of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. Yet Ravenclaw, prioritizing self-preservation above all else, stayed well out of it. Hufflepuff was too laid back to wade into the conflict. As a result, no one fanned the flames. Then Fred and George stormed in. "Look, George! The Weasley snake! He is sitting at the Gryffindor table." "You are right, Fred. How dare he, the traitor! And he has the nerve to show his face here." They flanked Warren, arms crossed, trying their hardest to look angry and disappointed. Warren tore off a hunk of bread and dunked it into his thick mushroom soup before taking a slow, deliberate bite. "Are you too sure you want to pick a fight with me?" He chewed thoughtfully for a moment. I seem to recall 2 people sucking up to me all summer long. I was so touched by their sincerity that I was going to slip 10 galleons into their Halloween package to support their little business venture." Warren turned and fixed his brothers with a solemn look. "But it seems they don't want it anymore." The twins slowly lowered their arms, exchanging a wary glance. "What do we do, Fred?" "Well, maybe we should forgive him? Won't that make us look weak?" 10 galleons. Percy said yesterday that no Weasley's ever been sorted into Slytherin. Someone has to teach him a lesson. They looked at each other again, then burst out laughing. "Who cares what Percy says? We certainly aren't doing this for the galleons. But how could we turn down our brother's heartfelt support for our business?" "Right, Fred? Right you are, George. So what if he's in Slytherin? Aren't they still Hogwarts students? Isn't he still our brother?" "Ahem. There are plenty of bastards in Slytherin, but our brother isn't one of them." "Exactly, George." Warren smiled and stopped teasing them. "Is 10 galleons enough?" The twins nodded eagerly. "That's plenty." "Perfect, Warren." In high spirits, they grabbed a few slices of bread and hurried off, chattering in low voices about their new products. Once they were far enough away, one of them muttered, "There's never been a Weasley in Slytherin." The other sighed. "What can we do? He's our brother, George." He let out another sigh. Well, that took care of the twins. Despite his calm exterior, Warren had actually been a little worried. Still, things hadn't gone nearly as badly as they could have. Of all the Weasleys, Fred and George were the most mischievous. At the same time, being closer in age, they were also the most protective of their younger brothers. He had written to Molly and Arthur last night explaining his sorting. He hadn't mentioned occlumency. He simply explained that he and the Hat had discussed it and that he wanted to study potions under Professor Snape. It was a matter of his studies, so with Snape involved, his parents probably wouldn't hold it against him. He sighed. If he had been this clear-headed about relationships in his last life, he would not have ended up as some ordinary office worker. Warren sighed. Then he heard Hermione beside him, speaking hesitantly. Actually, I do not think being in Slytherin means anything. He looked at her. Her face was flushed, but she spoke seriously. I have read Hogwarts, a history of magic, and modern magical history. Not one magical historian has ever said Slytherins are all bad. I do not think a sorting hat can decide if someone is good or evil. I even read in modern magical history about a really infamous Death Eater who was a Gryffindor. Warren smiled as he listened to her earnest explanation, realizing she was really just trying to comfort him. He ruffled her hair. Thanks, Hermione. He didn't need comforting, of course. Still, having a thoughtful girl in his corner felt rather nice. That pleasant mood carried him through breakfast and all the way to Transfiguration. It was the first class of the day. Warren and Hermione arrived to find only a few students inside. Malfoy and his cronies were there, along with Neville, whom Malfoy was busy taunting. A tabby cat sat on the teacher's desk. Seeing Warren, Malfoy and his goons instinctively shrank into the corner. Neville was grateful. He did not care that Warren was in Slytherin. He tearfully thanked him. Thanks, Warren. You are the only one who scares Malfoy. I heard you really sorted him out. You are brilliant. The tabby cat on the podium wore a very stern expression. Warren's good mood vanished. Thanks, Neville. If you could just shut up, that would be great. Equals. Chapter 19, Transfiguration Class. Chapter 19, Transfiguration Class. If he set aside his pursuit of power and had to choose the single subject that interested him most, Warren would undoubtedly pick Transfiguration. Its scope, complexity, and versatility permeated almost every aspect of the magical world. If a single discipline had to represent the essence of magic, Transfiguration would be the definitive choice. This was particularly true of its advanced branch, the study of animagy. After a brief exchange with Neville, Warren and Hermione took seats in the front row. Warren could not take his eyes off the tabby cat perched on the podium. Hermione found his behavior odd. Warren, is something wrong with that cat? Nothing. Warren had no intention of exposing Professor McGonagall's little trick. Honestly, if he hadn't read the books and known McGonagall's habits, he wouldn't have been able to identify an animagus transformation at a casual glance. Not with his current skill level. It was simply too natural. The coat patterns, the thickness and texture of the fur, everything was flawless. Only by observing closely could one notice that the tabby cat's mannerisms were not quite those of a true animal. But that was also Professor McGonagall's intention. She simply wanted to give the first years a small scare, not spy on them. Hermione didn't think much of it. Professor McGonagall, however, watching from her perch, was secretly startled. In all her years of teaching, she had met plenty of young witches and wizards who stared at her because they liked cats. But when she caught Warren's gaze, she knew that this Weasley, another apparent cat lover, was looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. He had indeed recognized her. Perhaps he would be another promising Transfiguration student, despite being a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall nodded at Warren. Warren nodded back. Their silent exchange surprised Hermione. Warren, no, she is. Hush. It's a surprise from the professor. Hermione quickly clapped a hand over her mouth and stared at Professor McGonagall with wide eyes. As class time approached, students trickled in. Occasionally, someone would notice the tabby cat on the podium, but no one paid it any mind. When the famous Harry Potter and his roommate Ron Weasley arrived last, Professor McGonagall leaped down from the podium, ended her animagus transformation, and returned to her human form. The entire class erupted in gasps of amazement. It was certainly an effective entrance, if the starry-eyed first years were anything to go by. Professor McGonagall, however, was far from pleased. 2 students had arrived late for her very first lesson. "Mr. Potter, Mr. Weasley. Perhaps I should turn you both into pocket watches? That way, you might actually remember the time." "We got lost, Professor," Harry offered weakly. "Then perhaps I should turn you into maps." Professor McGonagall's expression grew even sterner. "Why don't you take your seats? Or do you need a map to find them? 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for your tardiness. I hope this is a lesson you won't forget." The 2 boys shrank under her gaze and slunk into the only remaining empty seats, right next to Warren and Hermione. It seemed that no matter the setting, the seats closest to the teacher were universally unpopular. Transfiguration is among the most complex and dangerous magic you will study at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall waved her wand, transforming her desk into a pig. As the students gasped in unison, she declared loudly, "Anyone who misbehaves in my class will be punished. Don't say I didn't warn you." Harry and Ron turned pale. "She's just trying to scare you," Hermione whispered. "Hogwarts doesn't allow transfiguration to be used as punishment anymore. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." Before they could relax, Warren chimed in. "But there is no one keeping an eye on the professors. She could turn you into a pig without anyone noticing, and no one would ever know." Ron shot Warren a sullen look, but he didn't say anything. Harry, however, still liked Warren and didn't mind his teasing. Even though everyone he had met since entering the magical world had told him how awful Slytherins were, he had no first-hand experience with them. Professor McGonagall continued, "Before we begin, I must commend Mr. Warren Weasley. He was the only student in the class to recognize my animagus transformation. For that, Slytherin earns 5 points." Harry and Hermione clapped enthusiastically. Ron muttered under his breath, "Traitor." No one paid him any mind. Professor McGonagall launched into her lecture. Warren opened his textbook, A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration. Hermione noticed the book was crammed with handwritten notes. "You've already tried it?" Hermione exclaimed. Warren nodded. "Just inanimate objects. And I still have a lot of questions." Seeing the eager look on her face, he felt compelled to add, "I wouldn't recommend trying it on your own, Hermione. If you have questions, ask me or the professor." From his own experience, Warren knew Professor McGonagall's dramatic opening wasn't just for show. Transfiguration was indeed the most complex and dangerous branch of magic. Simple shape-changing of inanimate objects was one thing. Last night, he had successfully transfigured a cat treat into a mouse. However, that still counted as inanimate transfiguration rather than true living transfiguration. The mouse was not alive. It was a mere replica. Living transfiguration involved transforming a living being into an object or a completely different life form. Because this fundamentally altered the essence and nature of life, even for a brief moment, it was fraught with unpredictable dangers. Imagine transfiguring a rabbit into a teacup. If one attempted to reverse the spell, it would not revert to a rabbit. Instead, it would become a twisted, pulsing mass of flesh. Worse still, it would remain alive, twitching and screaming. The sheer horror of such an outcome was beyond imagining. Understandably, after a single attempt, Warren had been unable to eat for days. And that was with his mature and cautious state of mind. If a young witch or wizard rashly attempted human transfiguration and encountered similar results, the consequences would be too terrifying to imagine. The lesson began with a lecture from Professor McGonagall. To the first years who lacked a foundation, her explanations were complex and difficult. They could only frantically scribble down the key points. For Warren, however, it was the perfect opportunity to test his own fundamentals and theories. He spent the entire class taking detailed notes, then comparing them against his own knowledge to note the similarities and discrepancies. At the end of the lesson, Professor McGonagall gave each student a match and instructed them to transfigure it into a needle. She also taught them a charm known as werewolves. Everyone learned the incantation, but the charm was merely an aid, not the key to the transformation itself. By the time class ended, only Warren had succeeded completely. Hermione had managed to partially transform hers. One end had sharpened to a point. Excellent, excellent. Mr. Weasley and Miss Granger. Professor McGonagall held up their results for the class to see. As you can see, Mr. Weasley's transformation is flawless. Miss Granger has not entirely succeeded yet, but she has accomplished what I asked. I have every confidence that given another 10 minutes, she would produce a perfect needle. 5 points to Slytherin and 5 to Gryffindor. Now, your homework is... After assigning an essay and dismissing the class, Professor McGonagall called out, Mr. Weasley, please stay behind. I need to speak with you. Chapter 20, A Professor's Invitation. Chapter 20, A Professor's Invitation. Professor McGonagall led Warren to her office. It was situated on the second floor, with a window overlooking the Quidditch pitch. It was a small perk of being deputy headmistress, one that suited her passion for the sport. Once inside, Professor McGonagall seemed to shed some of her usual severity. She even offered Warren a biscuit before asking, Mr. Weasley, I could not speak at length during class. You have been practicing transfiguration at home, have you not? Yes, Professor. I was using my brother's old textbooks. I believe I have emphasized to your brothers just how dangerous it can be. Professor McGonagall pursed her lips. Warren nodded. That is why I restricted myself to inanimate transfiguration, Professor. I started with small objects, just as Percy noted in the textbook. I tackled simple changes first, then moved on to the complex ones. Here are some of my notes. He withdrew his heavily annotated copy of A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration and presented it to her. Professor McGonagall leafed through it. A new book? You reviewed it again before the start of term. Yes, Professor. Professor McGonagall fell silent, studying the notes intently. After a long moment, she closed the book with a faint, pleased smile. I see, Mr. Weasley. You have prepared thoroughly. Your records of each attempt are very detailed. She did not voice her surprise aloud, but she sighed inwardly. Initially, she had thought Warren was merely dabbling, or perhaps that his brothers had helped him lay a basic foundation. But after reading his notes, she realized his grasp of transfiguration was actually quite advanced. The proof was on the last page of the textbook. Today, I successfully transformed Milo's treat into a mouse. For a moment, I thought I had created life, but clearly, I did not. The mouse's behavior was dictated entirely by my own intent. It was merely a puppet shaped like a mouse, lacking the true vitality of a living creature. I do not yet possess the knowledge to resolve this. How is this addressed in advanced transfiguration? Spells require corresponding emotions. Is transfiguration any different? When changing an inanimate object into a living thing, or transforming between life forms, perhaps the key lies in the target's thoughts and emotions, or even its memories. She had to admit that the passage had unsettled her. It was not because of Warren's progress in transfiguration, but rather his theorizing about the nature of the subject itself. With such talent, why did he have to be in Slytherin? After a moment's hesitation, Professor McGonagall finally spoke, her voice a little dry. She had built her life on fairness and impartiality. Mr. Weasley, as you know, not all students learn at the same pace. Some are more gifted. She disliked categorizing students, but it was simply a fact of life. Headmaster Dumbledore encourages professors to form clubs for students who advance quickly, providing them with more targeted instruction. Mr. Weasley, would you be interested in joining my Transfiguration Club? Her cheeks warmed slightly. She felt as though she were poaching. Still, she watched Warren with anticipation. Professors had the right to extend an invitation, just as the student had the right to refuse. Beneath her eager gaze, Warren smiled. "I would be honored, Professor McGonagall." "So, you joined the Transfiguration Club?" Hermione exclaimed in surprise from the Gryffindor table in the Great Hall. "Of course. Professor McGonagall said my level is high enough. Regular classes won't teach me much more. The other members are at least fourth years. That is where I can really learn, instead of wasting time in class." Warren filled out the club application form as he ate. Hermione stared at the form, her eyes practically glowing with intensity. She hesitated, then asked, if I could transform a match into a needle perfectly, just like you did today, would I stand a chance?" "Not necessarily," Warren replied after a moment's thought. "But you could ask Professor McGonagall and see." The instant the words left his mouth, Hermione snatched 2 pieces of bread and raced off toward the library like a whirlwind. She had found a new motivation. Harry and Ron, eavesdropping nearby, exchanged glances. They were already revealing their true colors as academic slackers. To them, everything at Hogwarts was fresh and exciting. Studying? Why waste time on that when you could be exploring? They couldn't truly understand Hermione's envy and ambition. Nor could they see why Warren joining a club and taking extra classes was anything to be happy about. Ron, however, was particularly bothered by the silver and green snake badge pinned to Warren's chest. Seeing Warren still sitting at the Gryffindor table and even stealing a piece of roast beef from his plate, he finally couldn't hold back. "Why don't you go sit at the Slytherin table? Why do you have to steal our food? Is it because you think Harry is an easy target?" Harry looked confused. He didn't understand the Weasleys. Warren said nothing. He slowly finished his roast beef, then pulled a small pouch from his school bag and opened it. Inside was a brand new, complete wand maintenance kit. Ron's eyes went wide. Harry could practically hear him swallow. This ploy was all too familiar. Ron's face flushed crimson. He was torn between desire and indignation. He wanted to snatch the bag and hurl it into Warren's smug, annoying face. But years of holding back, combined with the kit's exorbitant price, robbed him of the courage. From past experience, Warren, that devil, would exploit that desire to tempt him into submission. He decided then and there that he would not yield. He was a Gryffindor standing firm against a Slytherin. Then he felt a hand ruffle his hair. "Take it, Ron. You have charms this afternoon. You'll need it. Study hard. No more goofing off." By the time Ron looked up, Warren was already walking away. Only the open bag remained on the seat. As his brother's figure vanished around the corner, Harry noticed Ron's eyes were red. His usually easygoing friend sniffled, tears streaming down his face. He reached for the maintenance kit and hugged it tight against his chest. Sniffling, he asked, "Harry, not all Slytherins are bad, are they?" It dawned on Harry. Ron had been terrified the entire time that his brother might change. He simply hadn't known how to say it. He gave Ron's shoulder a gentle pat and nodded firmly. "No." As he walked back toward the Slytherin common room, Warren hummed a cheerful tune. Who said he only had one trick? Equals. Chapter 21, Potions Class, Part 1. Over the next few days, Warren's life at Hogwarts settled into a comfortable routine. He attended classes daily, answered the professors' questions, and absorbed their feedback, eagerly satisfying his thirst for knowledge. On the very first day of school, during charms, his masterful execution of the levitation charm earned him high praise from Professor Flitwick, an expert in the field who was rumored to have goblin ancestry. Flitwick even took the time to examine Warren's notes personally. However, he stopped short of inviting Warren to join the Charms Club. "Your magical core is still developing, Mr. Warren Weasley. Students your age need to master the basics before they delve into advanced topics, Professor Flitwick told him in his high-pitched voice. But I promise you, once you reach your third year, I will extend an invitation assuming you have the time. I imagine the Transfiguration Club will likely claim a significant portion of your energy by then. To show his appreciation for Warren's talent, he awarded Slytherin 20 points that day. This pleased Warren immensely. He wasn't about to pass up any opportunity to earn points, not with the new quest the system had activated after the previous storyline. Main quest: help Slytherin win the House Cup at the end of this school year. Reward: 1 talent point 50 scales of magic. It seemed simple enough on the surface, but anyone familiar with the future knew it would be a nightmare. The greatest wizard of the age was currently grooming his savior and was perfectly willing to shamelessly rig the point system in the boy's favor. Although this would be the only instance in the coming years, it still directly conflicted with the system's quest. Warren hadn't devised a solution yet, but he wasn't one to give up easily. He would simply have to give it his all. 2 days passed. He endured the mind-numbing history of magic class. Professor Bin's hypnotic drone was truly a marvel. Warren only managed to stay awake for half the lesson before nodding off, yet he still received 5 points from the ghost. Though the professor did call him by the wrong name, he also sat through a mediocre astronomy class. Astronomy was compulsory because it served as the foundation for divination. Out of respect for his abysmal 2 rating in divination talent, Warren shamelessly recited astronomical knowledge from his past life, much to Professor Sinistra's confusion. She was simply puzzled as to why Warren was so fixated on whether the solar system had 8 or 9 planets. Professor Sprout's herbology class proved far more interesting. Naturally, she did not allow the first years to do any hands-on work during the first session. She simply led them to the Hogwarts greenhouses and provided a brief introduction to the various magical plants cultivated there. However, the students were less interested in the plants than in the greenhouses themselves. The greenhouses were enchanted with an undetectable extension charm and divided into distinct climate zones such as forests, wetlands, plateaus, and deserts to accommodate the different habitats. It felt like stepping into a dream world. In that class, relying on rote memorization of the textbook, Warren matched Hermione with 20 points each. Neville Longbottom, surprisingly, turned out to be a natural. He even earned 10 points for Gryffindor. Fortunately, that very evening, Gryffindor lost 20 points because Fred and George pulled a prank in the corridor. Thank goodness! Even more thanks were due to the subsequent defense against the dark arts class. Professor Quirrell, with his turban and overpowering garlic breath, was disliked by everyone. His teaching style was also problematic. He merely read straight from the textbook. When Seamus Finnegan pressed him for details on how to handle a reanimated zombie, the professor began to stammer incoherently. Warren stepped in to smooth things over, for which Professor Quirrell was grateful, awarding Slytherin 10 points. Then, a little while later, as if suffering a sudden bout of amnesia, he awarded Slytherin another 10. Note: this book utilizes a combination of film and novel canon regarding class scheduling. Ron and Harry whispered to one another, he must have had his brains drained by a vampire. But Warren knew the truth. That second batch of points was likely granted by the Dark Lord. Voldemort held a deep, twisted affection for Hogwarts and Slytherin. At the height of his power, his greatest wish was to become a professor at Hogwarts. When he was refused the position, he placed a jinx on the defense against the dark arts post. What I cannot have, no one else shall. True love, indeed. Time flew by, and soon it was Friday. Today marked the final class of the first week, potions. Early that morning, Harry and Ron were already sighing in dread. I think Professor Snape doesn't like me. I mean, the way he looked at me at the opening feast, it was terrifying. Don't be silly, Harry. I think he looks at everyone like they owe him 500 galleons. I heard he especially favors Slytherins. Humph, Warren must be ecstatic. Ron couldn't help but glance toward the Ravenclaw table, his expression sour. Sure enough, Warren was sitting on the Ravenclaw side today. Barely a week into the term, the first years had already singled out their greatest eccentric, Warren Weasley. On the first day, when he took a seat at the Gryffindor table, everyone naturally assumed he belonged there. He was a Weasley, after all. But by the second day, they realized just how mistaken that assumption was. He actually went to sit with the Hufflepuffs, getting along famously with those amiable badgers. Rumor had it he had even wandered through the Hufflepuff common room that night. That rumor had originated with Ron, who had told Warren that the Hogwarts kitchens were located right next to the Hufflepuff common room. And just like that, before the week was out, Warren Weasley, that peculiar boy, had already visited every single house table. Now, every morning when students entered the Great Hall for breakfast, their first instinct was to check their own house table to see if the redhead was there. This strange new habit quickly spread across all the year groups, becoming something of a daily ritual. Most baffling of all, no matter which house Warren visited, there was always at least one person he could chat with animatedly. Slytherin had Malfoy, though he didn't seem particularly enthusiastic about it. Hufflepuff had Cedric, and Gryffindor had plenty of willing partners. Hearing Penelope Clearwater's silvery laughter from across the Ravenclaw table, Ron scoffed. Humph, he's always loved flirting with girls. He hasn't changed a bit. Just then, he saw Hermione snap suddenly, slamming her book shut. Then why don't you, as his brother, try to talk him out of it? All you do is talk rubbish. Ron was baffled. Are you mental? What does this have to do with me? Hermione, however, seemed to take personal offense, abruptly changing the subject. She rattled off a string of criticisms with her thin lips pressed tight. What else can you two do besides gossip and complain? If you're worried about Professor Snape's favoritism, why don't you do your homework? Classes have been going on for a week already. After her tirade, she stood up and left, clutching her book. Ron, bewildered and annoyed by the scolding, called out to her retreating back. She's insane. Warren flirting with girls isn't my fault. Why yell at me? Just wait, she'll be all smiles and laughter with Warren again in class. That stupid little girl. Sure enough, he was right. In potions class, Warren, now sitting next to Hermione again, easily charmed her with a few words. Even though Ron and Harry had predicted correctly, they couldn't bring themselves to feel happy. Their other suspicion had come true as well. Ah, Harry Potter. In the dark dungeon, Professor Snape, half hidden in the shadows, fixed his cold, dark eyes intently on Harry. New chapter is coming soon. Write a review.